Since childhood, this young man's fate was extremely tragic. He witnessed his father being killed. The pain and anger that erupted caused him to accidentally activate a special ability. Sharp bones pierced from his knuckles. After a scream, the young man immediately rushed at the enemy to avenge his father. Surprisingly, the enemy declared that he was his biological father. Wolverine could not accept this truth. In extreme pain, he left his home. At that time, his brother Sabretooth also chased after him. Wolverine and his brother began their journey of wandering everywhere. As time passed, Wolverine and his brother experienced 2 world wars. With strong self-healing ability and high fighting skills, they charged across the battlefield. No one could stop them. That's why they became legendary warriors. Over time, Sabretooth became more and more immersed in violence and greed. He never showed mercy to his enemies. He did not even spare women. When officers came to stop him, he also attacked without mercy. Wolverine was extremely dissatisfied with these actions, but because of their blood relationship, he still chose to bear the sins with his older brother. The army sentenced the two to death, but with their extraordinary self-healing ability, ordinary bullets could not kill them. With no other choice, the army had to put them in prison. One day, Colonel William appeared before them. He invited them to join the special forces so they could regain their freedom. Wolverine and his brother did not hesitate and immediately accepted the colonel's invitation. Very quickly, they carried out their first mission. It was an attack on the building where a group of smugglers were. Gunner Zero pretended to surrender. Then he suddenly opened fire with both hands. The 2 guards on both sides fell down immediately. Then Zero threw the magazine and gun high up, professionally reloaded in the air, then skillfully jumped over the fence. In this way, he easily destroyed all the enemies. The tank driver quickly got into the tank to fire the cannonballs, but Blob's punch did not give him a chance. After destroying all the enemies outside, Wolverine's group went straight to the top floor by elevator. Seeing this, the boss immediately cut off the power to the elevator, but that could not stop them. In the group, there was also a mutant with the ability to control electricity. The boss had to order his soldiers to point their guns at the elevator door, but as soon as the door opened, Deadpool gave a beautiful performance. The boss intended to attack by surprise, but Phantom teleported and forced him to surrender. Through this mission, Wolverine realized one thing. The colonel's purpose was not to destroy the smuggling group, but he wanted to take possession of the meteorite on the table. The task force was not actually established for justice. To achieve their goals, the members did not hesitate to massacre the villagers. Wolverine felt extremely angry and disgusted by those brutal actions. He decided to leave the group and break up with Sabretooth. 6 years passed. Wolverine lived a peaceful and simple life. He worked at a sawmill and had a beautiful wife. However, one day the colonel of the old mutant group came to Wolverine. He informed Wolverine that the mutant group had disbanded, but recently there was a man who was hunting down each member of the old group. He was worried that the next target might be him and Wolverine. Wolverine thanked the colonel for the warning, but Wolverine insisted that he would protect himself and that the colonel should know how to take care of his own safety. On the way, Wolverine took his wife home. 2 men blocked their way. At first, he politely asked them to move the car so he could pass, but one of the men rushed in and punched him. Just as Wolverine's claws were about to appear, his wife put her hand on his and spoke softly. One sentence made the man obediently drive away. Wolverine was very curious to know how his wife did it, and she explained that persuasion was an innate ability of women. That night, she told Wolverine a legend about the Wolverine. The name Wolverine has been engraved in Wolverine's mind ever since. The next day, Wolverine got up early to go to work as usual. He did not know that a stranger had blocked his wife's way. With his keen sense of smell, he smelled a strong scent of blood. Following the scent of blood, he discovered a wolf's head that had just been severed. Looking at the claw marks on the tree, he guessed who the culprit was. Feeling something was wrong, Wolverine immediately rushed to find his wife. She had been brutally murdered. Seeing the person he loved die tragically, Wolverine completely exploded. He followed the killer's trail and found Sabretooth in the bar. He questioned why Sabretooth did that. Sabretooth only replied that he did it to attract Wolverine's attention. After hearing that, Wolverine became even angrier. He immediately rushed to fight Sabretooth. Unfortunately, because he had not fought for a long time, Wolverine had lost his agility and strength like before. He was defeated by Sabretooth without being able to fight back. His claws were even broken. Wolverine was unconscious and quickly taken to the hospital. However, his wound had healed a long time ago. At this time, Colonel William appeared before him again. He informed Wolverine that there was a more powerful weapon that could help him defeat Sabretooth, but the price was that Wolverine had to return to the mutant team to carry out his revenge plan. Wolverine decided to accept the Colonel's request to remember his his wife, he also changed himself a new name, and that was Wolverine. Then the experiment began. Wolverine was immersed in a water tank. Dozens of hot steel needles penetrated his body. In those steel needles was a liquid extracted from a meteorite containing adamantium. With a strong will for revenge and self-healing ability, Wolverine overcame this experiment. At this time, he became a man of steel. When the experiment was successful, Colonel William immediately ordered Wolverine's memory to be erased and DNA samples taken from his body. However, it was unexpected that these words had already reached Wolverine's ears. He thought he heard them. With an invulnerable body and sharp steel claws, Wolverine easily destroyed the guards blocking his way. Then he cut through the steel door and escaped from the laboratory. Without a single piece of clothing, Wolverine ran into a farmer's barn. He met a kind family. Not only did they not chase him away, but they also welcomed him warmly. They did not expect that they were about to encounter disaster. The next day, the old man gave Wolverine his son's coat. When Wolverine was about to leave, the old man and his wife were shot down by snipers. Zero chased them. 2 artillery shells turned the house into rubble. Wolverine rushed out of the sea of fire on a motorcycle. Seeing this, Zero's expression changed. He jumped onto a helicopter to continue chasing Wolverine. But now, Wolverine was no longer the same. He used his steel claws to turn the car around, then jumped onto an armored vehicle, holding a machine gun and firing continuously. The helicopter immediately returned fire with artillery shells. However, Wolverine took advantage of the explosion to jump into the air. He immediately cut off the helicopter's propeller. The helicopter lost control and crashed on the spot. That night, Wolverine went to find his old friend, Phantom. There was also a muscular man named Blob, but now he weighed over 500 pounds. Wolverine wanted to ask Blob for news of Sabretooth, but he accidentally said something that made Blob angry. Blob felt insulted when he was called a big brute. With no other choice, the two had to fight. Although Blob was very strong with thick skin and strong muscles, he had a weak point, which was his head. Therefore, Wolverine quickly defeated him. Blob told Wolverine that Sabretooth always worked for Colonel William. He was hunting and killing mutants to extract their genes. The goal was to create the strongest mutant that could not be defeated. Blob did not know where their base was. However, there was one person who might have known. It was a mutant who had escaped from the laboratory, named Gambit. With the help of Phantom, Wolverine quickly found Gambit. To prevent Gambit from escaping, Phantom blocked the escape route. But in the alley, Phantom saw a familiar figure. It was Sabretooth, who was hunting them. Phantom was very confident in his teleportation ability. He continuously used it to attack Sabretooth. However, Sabretooth suddenly attacked and grabbed Phantom's spine. Meanwhile, Wolverine was talking to Gambit, and Gambit noticed the necklace around his neck. Before Wolverine could explain, Gambit attacked him. Wolverine was sent flying, and he saw that Phantom had been killed. Immediately, hatred rose when Wolverine met his enemy again. After just a few moves, Wolverine nailed Sabretooth to the wall. When he was about to finish off his enemy to avenge his wife, Gambit suddenly jumped down from above to attack. Sabretooth took that opportunity to stand up and run away. Wolverine wanted to chase after him, but Gambit stopped him with a blow. Wolverine got angry and broke Gambit's stick. Seeing that the situation was not good, Gambit quickly climbed the ladder with the intention of escaping, but Wolverine did not forgive him. Finally, under Wolverine's threat, Gambit agreed to take him to the island. They flew a plane to an island. When Wolverine found the Colonel, he discovered that his wife, whom he thought was dead, was there. It turned out that his wife was a spy planted by the Colonel beside him, and she was also a mutant. Code name was Silver Fox. Her superpower was to control the thoughts of others. Her mission was to make Wolverine voluntarily accept the experiment of injecting adamantium metal into his body. When Wolverine found out the truth, he felt like his world was collapsing. He angrily left the lab, but before he could go far, he heard Silver Fox's painful scream. Wolverine couldn't leave his wife alone, so he rushed back to the lab and fought Sabretooth. Sabretooth was still unable to defeat Wolverine. When Wolverine was about to kill Sabretooth, Silver Fox stopped him. She said that he was not a monster. Wolverine finally had to knock Sabretooth out. Silver Fox then told Wolverine that she was a spy because the Colonel had kidnapped her sister, but her feelings for Wolverine were not fake. In order to save Silver Fox's sister, the two went to the prison together. Wolverine freed all the imprisoned mutants, and finally Silver Fox and her sister were reunited. At that moment, the Colonel released his ultimate weapon. He was Deadpool. He used to be talkative, but now his mouth was sewn shut. He possessed many mutant genes, including Wolverine's self-healing ability. Facing an enemy with such perfect fighting skills, Wolverine clearly did not have the upper hand. He had to climb the chimney. However, he did not expect that Deadpool also possessed the Phantom's teleportation ability. Wolverine had no choice but to try to fight Deadpool Deadpool directly. However, Deadpool was extremely strong. He quickly defeated Wolverine. Just as the Colonel ordered Deadpool to cut off Wolverine's head, Sabretooth appeared in time and pushed him away. Thanks to that, he saved Wolverine from death. But Deadpool teleported like a demon, making them not know where to hit. Not only that, Deadpool also possessed Cyclops' superpowers. Then he attacked Sabretooth with a fatal blow. In the moment of life and death, Wolverine did not fear danger, rushed from behind, then he swung a slash at Deadpool's head. Finally, he kicked Deadpool into the abyss and ended the fierce battle. Wolverine carried his seriously injured wife away. Unexpectedly, he was ambushed from behind by the Colonel with an adamantium bullet. Wolverine angrily rushed at the Colonel. However, he was immediately shot in the head. Just as the Colonel was about to finish off Silver Fox with the last of her strength, Silver Fox controlled the Colonel's mind. She forced him to walk until he died. Wolverine woke up soon after. Although his wounds were healed, he had lost all his memories. Seeing his dead wife beside him, he felt only heartache, but he could not remember who she was. He finally left the island alone. Cyclops followed the voice in his head's instructions and led all the mutants into the forest. There, they met a mysterious bald man. He was the one who had guided Cyclops. The mother was about to be executed. In his utter despair, the boy accidentally awakened the terrible power within him. 4 strong men could not hold the young boy. Even the steel door was bent. This scene caught the eye of the Black King officer. The boy with the special ability was named Eric. When he was young, Eric could not control his ability. In order to awaken Eric's ability, the Black King officer used his mother as a hostage. He forced Eric to move the coin on the table. Despite Eric's best efforts, the coin did not move. The Black King did not give Eric any more time. He immediately pulled the trigger. The rage caused Eric to activate his superpower. The bell on the table was compressed into a block. The helmets of the 2 soldiers were pressed tightly. All the metal objects flew in the air. Anger became the key to unleash Eric's superpower. The Black King left the coin to Eric and left the barracks. He did not expect that this coin would bring him great disaster later. Since then, Eric lived in hatred for 18 years. Now he has better control over his superpowers. For 18 years, Eric has been constantly looking for ways to avenge his mother. But no matter how hard he tried, Eric could only find one bank where Black King deposited his money. The bank manager refused to reveal any information. In a fit of anger, Eric pulled out the manager's teeth. Unable to bear the torture, the manager revealed the location of Black King. Meanwhile, Black King was plotting to provoke a war between the US and the Soviet Union. He forced an American colonel to agree to deploy missiles in Turkey during a military meeting. This could incite a conflict between the US and the Soviet Union. When the colonel refused, Black King ordered his subordinates to warn him. This wind controller was named Reptile. With just a light wave of his hand, he sent the colonel flying into the wall. Next, a woman named Emma Frost appeared. Her superpower was telepathy. Besides, she also had the ability to turn into diamonds under pressure. From Black King and Emma Frost, the colonel had to agree to Black King's request. However, all of this was seen by CIA agent Rose. She immediately reported all the information to her superiors, but her superiors thought she was talking nonsense, and he hung up the phone in anger, because at that time, the colonel was sitting right in front of him. In fact, 2.5 minutes ago, a subordinate of Black King named Azazel used teleportation to bring the colonel to a military meeting. At the meeting, the colonel agreed to deploy missiles in Turkey. After completing the mission, the colonel wanted to take the money and escape, but Black King refused to pay. The colonel angrily pulled out a grenade with the intention of ending their lives together. However, Black King was not afraid. He grabbed the grenade and pulled the safety pin. It turned out that Black King was also a mutant. His superpower was the ability to absorb energy. This source of energy not only kept him young forever, but it could also be used to attack enemies. Rose went to the bar with the hope of proving the existence of mutants. Here she met Professor X. His real name was Charlie. At that time, the professor was still an expert in genetic mutation research. He used his telepathy to read Rose's memories, and he also showed interest in mutants, so he decided to help Rose cooperate with the CIA to deal with the Black King. That night, Eric finally found the Black King. Sensing the threat, Emma Frost immediately attacked Eric's mind. Eric lost the ability to fight and was knocked into the water. At the same time, Professor and Rose led the Navy to the scene. Reptile calmly waved his hand to create a tornado. The tornado overturned the chasing ship. At this time, Eric used his superpower to control the anchor to attack the yacht. Then with a strong swing of his hand, Eric cut the ship in half. However, what he did not expect was that there was a submarine hidden under the yacht. Eric did not want the Black King to escape, so he used his superpower to hold on to the submarine. Seeing that, the professor jumped into the water to stop Eric, because he knew that if he continued like this, Eric Eric would definitely drown. This life-saving attempt opened the way for a complicated relationship between the two friends. The story of X-Men also began there. Then they arrived at the CIA's secret base. This supersonic plane was the work of genius Hank. The professor used telepathy, and he immediately realized that Hank was a mutant. When he found himself exposed in front of everyone, Hank no longer hid. His superpower was having legs as flexible as arms. He thought everyone would laugh at him, but unexpectedly, everyone looked at him with admiration. Hank was overjoyed. He immediately somersaulted in the air. Mystique looked at Hank as if she saw herself. She gently praised him as wonderful. This made Hank completely immersed in his emotions. The feelings between them arose from that moment. In order to find more mutant teammates, Hank built a brainwave amplifier for the professor. This device could amplify the professor's telepathic abilities. When the machine started working, countless images of different people appeared in the professor's mind. The people in black and white are normal people. After identifying their targets, the professor and Eric began to recruit them. Among them were bar girls, taxi drivers, and even prisoners in prison. Finally, Wolverine. But Wolverine did not care about the invitation of the professor and Eric, so they just quietly left. After the new mutants were gathered, they began to show their superpowers. This guy's name was Jarwin. His superpower is to adapt to any environment. For example, when he goes into water, he grows gills. Next is Benson, who has the superpower of attacking opponents with sound waves. The female dancer in the bar is named Angel. Her superpower is to spray acid from her mouth. Finally, there is Harva, who still cannot control his ability. The professor received information about the Black King. He and Eric immediately ventured into his base, but they only found Emma Frost there. The Black King had disappeared long ago. The professor's telepathy did not work on Emma Frost. Realizing that the gentle approach was not effective, they decided to use strong measures. The two worked together smoothly. They used metal to tie her up. The professor took the opportunity to read her memories, and thanks to that, he discovered the Black King's plot. It turned out that the Black King was plotting to cause a nuclear war, partly to destroy humanity, partly to strengthen mutants through nuclear radiation. That way, mutants would rule the world. Although the professor and Eric already knew the whole truth, but at this time, Black King led his troops to attack the CIA base. Although facing the strong firepower from the guards, Black King did not dodge. He absorbed all the energy and stomped on the ground. Black King's target was the newly recruited mutants. He wanted them to join his side. After he persuaded them, only Angel agreed to follow him. Jarwin wanted to rebel against Black King, so he pretended to listen to him. He then had Harvok attack Black King. However, the attack did not hurt Black King. He transferred the energy he had absorbed into Jarwin's body. Although Jarwin had turned his body into metal, he could not withstand the energy blast. He was eventually reduced to ashes. When the professor and Eric returned to the CIA base, it was in ruins. The professor decided to give special training to the members to improve their fighting skills. Hank created a flying suit for Benson. They believed that Benson could fly thanks to sound waves. Next was Harvok. He was equipped with an energy-concentrating armor. Thanks to that, his attacks became more precise. After a period of hard training, Benson finally mastered the skills of flying and controlling sound waves. Harvok was also able to control his attacks precisely. However, only Eric had not improved. He always relied on anger as a source of power. The professor thought that if Eric found a balance between anger and calm, his power would reach its peak. So the professor used telepathy to guide Eric to remember the warm memories that had been forgotten. These beautiful memories could awaken the greatest power in him. In the evening, Hank used Mystique's genes to create a special serum. This serum could help mutants return to normal people. However, under Eric's influence, Mystique gradually changed her mind. She no longer thought that mutants had to bow to humans. She believed that mutants were the most superior species in the Bra. He began to absorb energy from the nuclear reactor. When he absorbed enough, no one could stop him. The professor located the Black King submarine using Benson's sonar. With a wave of his hand, Eric pulled the submarine up from the bottom of the sea. At this time, Reptile stepped out of the submarine. Immediately, he created a tornado towards the fighter plane. Distracted, Eric threw the submarine onto the sand, and the fighter plane also fell onto the sand. Next was a direct confrontation between the mutants. Reptile was defeated by Harva as soon as the match began. Benson and Angel fought each other in the air, while Hank and Azazel faced each other. Although Hank was strong, he could not defeat Azazel's cunning and cruelty. When Hank was about to be killed, Black King suddenly called Azazel back. When Azazel realized something was wrong, Hank promptly counterattacked and knocked Azazel unconscious. Of course, Black King was Mystique in disguise. Under the professor's guidance, Eric tore open the submarine's hull. He entered the cockpit and turned off the nuclear reactor. However, the Black Black King had already absorbed enough nuclear energy, and Eric was no match for him. His helmet could also neutralize the professor's telepathy. However, the Black King was too arrogant and complacent. Eric pretended to surrender, making him lose his guard. Thanks to that, Eric took his helmet. The professor locked the Black King in place. But what the professor didn't expect was that Eric put on the Black King's helmet. Thus, he severed his connection with the professor. In fact, Eric agreed with the Black King's point of view. He also believed that mutants should rule the world and not live in harmony with humans. However, because Black King killed his mother, he had to take revenge. After saying that, Eric used the coin that Black King had given him years ago to stab him straight in the head. The revenge was paid. Eric threw Black King's body down in front of everyone. Black King was really dead. After witnessing the mutant's power, people began to fear. They decided to unite to destroy the mutant. The order was given. The two armies joined forces to point their guns at the mutant. A series of missiles flew towards the beach. Eric just waved his hand slightly, and the missiles in the air seemed to freeze. Then he waved his hand again, and this time, all the missiles turned back. The professor did not want to see innocent soldiers die, so he tried his best to stop Eric. When the missiles were about to fall, the two army commanders were ready to accept death. At the moment of danger, Moira fired continuously at Eric, but Eric easily repelled the bullets. He just didn't expect that a bullet accidentally hit the professor's spine. That was the reason why the professor was paralyzed for life. Eric quickly hugged the professor. He sincerely wanted the professor to accompany him to fight for the rights of mutants. The professor still insisted that mutants should live peacefully with humans. The two had different opinions, so from now on, they would not accompany each other. Mystique chose to follow Eric, while Azazel and the others also decided to follow him. With the help of Moira, the professor established a mutant academy to train more mutants. Then, Eric and his teammates infiltrated the CIA, and they successfully rescued Emma Frost. Since then, the name Eric was no longer used. Now he was known by the new name Magneto. Over the years, Wolverine had been wandering around the world. He had both regained his memories and made a living by fighting. One day, a strong man wanted to teach Wolverine a lesson. He used all kinds of despicable tricks. Wolverine politely lay down for 2 seconds, but immediately after that, he showed his opponent what real strength was. Finally, with a powerful headbutt, Wolverine quickly knocked down the strong man. The audience was stunned. Everyone asked for their ticket money back because the match had ended too quickly. However, in the crowd, there was a little girl quietly watching Wolverine. After a day of fighting, Wolverine went to the bar to order a beer, but the man he had defeated accidentally appeared there. He guessed that Wolverine was a mutant, so he threatened to reveal his true identity to the government if he did not return the bet. However, Wolverine did not care about that threat. He immediately showed his mutant ability. The man was so scared that he almost peed his pants. But at that moment, a long, hard black object was pointed at the back of Wolverine's head. Not wanting to kill anyone, Wolverine used his claws to cut the gun in half. He also warned them not to mess with him anymore. After speaking, Wolverine turned and left the bar. He felt that he could not stay there for long. He decided to drive his truck to another arena. However, he had not been gone for long when a strange noise suddenly came from behind the car. When he got out of the car to check, Wolverine found a young girl hiding in the trunk. He immediately thought that this had been a trap, so he chased the girl out of the car. But before they could go 20 meters, Wolverine softened, so he stopped the car and gave the girl a ride. When they got in the car, the girl introduced herself to Wolverine as Rouge, and she was also a mutant. Her ability was that whoever she touched would have bad luck. Wolverine replied that he didn't care because he was very strong and didn't die easily. It wasn't long before Wolverine detected danger through his sense of smell. Suddenly, a figure like a beast rushed out of the grass. That person was Sabretooth. He was now Magneto's subordinate. Before the sudden attack, Wolverine was quickly knocked out. At this time, the crashed car started to burn. Rouge was trapped in the car and couldn't get out. The danger of an explosion was imminent. In the critical moment, Storm and Cyclops arrived in time. With good coordination, they chased Sabretooth away. Cyclops used a laser to cut open the car door. Right before the car exploded, they got Rouge out. Wolverine and Rouge were then taken to Professor X's academy. Here, Jean was in charge of treatment. When she was about to inject Wolverine with medicine, Wolverine suddenly woke up and immediately strangled her. When he calmed down, Wolverine pushed Jean away and rushed out of the hospital room. At that moment, a voice rang out in Wolverine's head. It was Professor X communicating with him telepathically. Following the voice's instructions, Wolverine went to the professor's office. Professor X was the principal of this academy. At the same time, he was also a mutant with the strongest psychic abilities. He invited Wolverine to join the X-Men team, but Wolverine was used to living alone and wandering, so he immediately refused the invitation. When Wolverine was about to leave, Professor X used his telepathic ability to tell him about the difficulties Wolverine encountered after losing his memory. Then he asked Wolverine to give him a chance. He promised to help Wolverine find all his lost memories. Hearing that, Wolverine decided to stay here temporarily. Then the professor began to take Wolverine to visit the academy. He introduced him to the students here. All of them were mutants like Wolverine. They possessed different supernatural powers. However, in the world outside, they were often discriminated against and mistreated by humans. The professor spared no expense in building this academy to protect mutants. He helped them learn how to control their abilities to use for justice. He also established an X-Men task force to deal with mutant-related crises. After knowing everything, Wolverine paid his respects to the professor, but the professor still did not understand why Magneto sent people to capture Wolverine, and what was Magneto's purpose. At this time, at the United Nations building, a summit on the issue of mutants was taking place. A congressman named Kelly was speaking. He was full of prejudice and fear of mutants. He believed that mutants were a threat to human society. He demanded that mutants reveal their identities and be controlled by humans, otherwise, they would be dealt with immediately. However, Magneto heard this speech. After the conference ended, Magneto sent Mystique on a mission. She disguised herself as Kelly's bodyguard and knocked him unconscious. She then took Kelly to Magneto's secret base. However, Magneto did not kill Kelly immediately. Instead, he used a more cruel trick. He activated a giant magnetic machine to turn Kelly into a mutant. However, the ability to stretch like rubber became a tool to help Kelly escape. Although he knew Kelly had escaped, Magneto was in no hurry to capture him, because Magneto wanted Kelly to suffer the discrimination of humans. Elsewhere, Wolverine groaned in pain all night. This attracted Rouge's attention. She went into the room and saw Wolverine's face showing pain and anxiety. She tried to wake him up, but this triggered Wolverine's self-defense reflex. 3 sharp blades stabbed straight into Rouge's chest. Wolverine hurriedly pulled the knife back. Rouge touched Wolverine's face, and immediately her wound healed. It turned out that Rouge's ability was to absorb other people's abilities. During an accident, Rouge used her powers to scare her classmates. Iceman then came to see Rouge. He informed her that the professor was very angry with her because of this, and she had to leave the school immediately. Rouge was shocked to hear this. Finally, she left in despair. Rouge did not know that it was not the real Iceman but Mystique in disguise. Professor X had put on a brainwave amplifying helmet, and after a while of searching, he located her. Wolverine drove Cyclops' motorcycle to that place. Finally, he found Rouge on a train. Wolverine gently told her that the professor was not angry with her. He truly wanted to help Rouge. As soon as he finished speaking, a large hole was torn into the front of the train. Magneto immediately appeared. Wolverine wanted to confront him, but Magneto immediately tied him up. Wolverine asked why Magneto was chasing him. Magneto laughed coldly and replied that he was not looking for Wolverine. Only then did Wolverine understand that his target was Rouge. Then Magneto pointed his finger, causing Wolverine to be thrown away. Rouge intended to take the opportunity to escape, but immediately after, she was injected with anesthetic by Magneto and collapsed on the spot. When Magneto led Rouge out of the station, the police surrounded them. Magneto calmly tilted his head. Then he immediately absorbed all the police's weapons and automatically pointed them at their heads. At this moment, Sabretooth suddenly strangled Magneto. In fact, the professor had controlled Sabretooth. To escape the control, Magneto shot a policeman. Luckily, Jean blocked the bullet. The bullet stopped right in front of the policeman's forehead, but Jean still could not control multiple targets at the same time. To avoid casualties, the professor had to release Sabretooth and let Magneto take Rouge away. That night, Senator Kelly transformed and came to Academy X himself. At this time, he was very weak. The professor used his telepathic ability and saw Magneto activating the magnetic field to transform Kelly. However, Magneto was exhausted after doing so. Combined with Rouge's ability to absorb power, the professor realized that Magneto wanted to transfer his power to Rouge. The purpose was to have her replace him in activating the magnetic field. In other words, Magneto was turning Rouge into prey. At the same time, Senator Kelly's cells lost control. Before Storm could react, the senator's body swelled up and dissolved into a puddle. Hearing this news, the professor immediately went to the search room to determine Rouge's location. However, as soon as he put on his helmet, the professor fell down in pain. It turned out that not long before, Mystique had transformed into the professor and sneaked into the lab. She then installed a virus into the device to stop Magneto's plan. John promptly removed the virus and bravely put on her helmet. Although her power was not as strong as the professor's, she still sensed Rouge's location near the Statue of Liberty. At that time, a United Nations conference was taking place. Magneto's real purpose was to place a magnetic field machine on top of the Statue of Liberty. From there, strong radiation would turn world leaders into mutants. That way, no one would discriminate against mutants anymore. After knowing Magneto's location, the team immediately boarded the spaceship to stop him. Because Wolverine wanted to save Rouge, he temporarily joined the X-Men team. Under Storm's protection, the spaceship successfully avoided the police patrol and quickly reached its destination. At this time, Rouge was tied up by Magneto under the torch of the Statue of Liberty. The group broke into the museum from the first floor, but before they could go far, Wolverine disappeared. When Wolverine reappeared, he suddenly attacked his teammates. At this time, another Wolverine rushed in. It was clear that Mystique had impersonated Wolverine. After keeping their distance, both sides simultaneously withdrew their claws. However, the imposter could never become real. In less than 2 rounds, the fake Wolverine was defeated and forced to flee. Immediately after, another of Magneto's subordinates appeared and continuously kicked everyone down. Then he used his long tongue to violently knock Storm down. While he was dancing in celebration, Jean used her psychic powers to control him. To escape the bondage, he spit a mouthful of saliva in Jean's face. Then he ran to the second floor and kicked Storm down the elevator shaft. When he thought he had won, the elevator suddenly flashed. Immediately, Storm appeared from the elevator with the power of lightning. He could not understand how she could survive so long. Finally, Storm defeated her enemy with a powerful lightning strike. Then Storm went to Wolverine. But Wolverine, with his intelligence, was not easily fooled. When everyone gathered, Cyclops asked Wolverine to prove that he was real. Then everyone went to the top of the Statue of Liberty to prepare to rescue Rouge. But suddenly, a mysterious force held Wolverine on the wall. The others were also controlled one by one. Magneto appeared. Wolverine's fist was pressed into his chest. Cyclops had his glasses taken away by Sabretooth. Magneto tried to convince everyone to join his side, but no one agreed. Seeing that he could not move them, Magneto gave up. He began transferring his powers to Rouge. After a scream of pain, Magneto was exhausted, but the magnetic device was activated. With no other choice, Wolverine stabbed himself to cut off the steel plate behind him. He finally escaped Magneto's control. Wolverine then retrieved Cyclops' glasses. The three worked together smoothly. They used Cyclops' laser to kill Sabretooth. Wolverine then asked Storm and Jean for help to climb up to the magnetic device. Just as he was about to destroy the device, Magneto suddenly counterattacked. Although his powers were reduced, Wolverine's claws were still bent 90 degrees. At the critical moment, Cyclops fired a laser beam precisely at Magneto's waist. This helped Wolverine escape from his control and successfully destroyed the magnetic device. The radiation waves from there quickly disappeared, and the crisis of humanity was finally resolved. After the battle, Wolverine used his self-healing ability to save Rouge's life, but Wolverine's body was full of wounds. The group then captured Magneto and returned to school by plane. Here, Wolverine was given first aid and treatment. When Wolverine recovered, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, Professor X also helped him find clues about his lost memories. That clue was located at an abandoned military camp in the Canadian Rocky Mountains. Wolverine then decided to leave school and begin his journey to regain his memories. Rouge wanted to go with him, but he refused. Wolverine gave her his military card and promised to return. Storm finally saw Congressman Kelly on TV. He canceled the mutant recognition proposal. Storm realized it was Mystique in disguise. It turned out that Mystique was not dead. She had escaped by turning into a guard. Magneto was also imprisoned by Professor X in a plastic prison. That way, no one would be able to incite a war between humans and mutants. However, things did not go that way. Recently, the White House was suddenly attacked. A mysterious mutant infiltrated here. He climbed and moved quickly on the walls and had the ability to teleport. He was Nightcrawler. He easily defeated all the guards. Nightcrawler rushed straight to the president and used his tail to pull out a 40-centimeter knife. Just as he was about to successfully assassinate him, a bodyguard behind him shot him. Nightcrawler had to quickly retreat from the scene. This assassination event once again made mutants the target of criticism. After hearing the news, Professor X considered the matter very serious. Therefore, he decided to investigate this incident himself. Because the person who could have planned this was still being held in the plastic prison, the question was who else could have done it besides Magneto. Professor X then went to the mutant search room and located Nightcrawler. He sent Storm and Jean to capture him. Meanwhile, the president began to review the mutant law. At this time, the person in charge of the mutant case, Stryker, met with the president. He presented a set of documents about Professor X's academy, and he expressed his suspicion that the president's assassin could be a mutant from the academy, and Professor X might be the mastermind. So Stryker asked the president to allow allow him to investigate. The president was hesitant at first, but after thinking about it, he agreed to Stryker's proposal. The president allowed Stryker to investigate and capture the mutant, but he was not allowed to harm the mutant. After receiving the president's consent, Stryker did not go to Professor X's academy immediately. He first went to the plastic prison. There he knocked Magneto unconscious and dropped a drop of mysterious liquid on his neck. Then something strange happened. When Magneto woke up, he obeyed Stryker's every word. Magneto also revealed all the secrets of the brainwave enhancer. It was the machine that Magneto built with Professor X when he was young. This proved that Stryker was the mastermind who directed Nightcrawler to assassinate the president. Meanwhile, Wolverine arrived at the military base he was looking for, and he discovered that the laboratory had become ruins. He had to return to the Mutant Academy in disappointment. As soon as he arrived, Wolverine saw Jean and Storm preparing to capture Nightcrawler. From their words, Wolverine found out about the assassination of the president, but Wolverine didn't care. He just wanted to find his lost memories. Later, Jean and Storm also found Nightcrawler and controlled him. However, Nightcrawler didn't know anything about the assassination of the president because he was controlled. His memories before entering the White House were erased. At this time, Jean and Storm discovered a strange wound on Nightcrawler's neck. It seemed that he had been injected with some kind of drug, so the two decided to take Nightcrawler back to school to meet Professor X. At the same time, Mystique was also secretly searching for Magneto's whereabouts. She still pretended to be Senator Kelly and approached people close to the president. Her efforts were not in vain. She finally found a clue about Magneto's detention. That night, Mystique disguised herself as Stryker's assistant. Then she broke into his office and successfully stole all of those documents about the plastic prison. When preparing to leave, Mystique discovered a folder on the computer related to the construction of a brainwave enhancement machine. When she opened it, she discovered that Stryker was building a brainwave enhancement machine identical to Professor X's device in the search room. Mystique wanted to know the exact location, but the machine required a password. At that moment, Stryker's real assistant was about to enter the office. Mystique had to transform into a cleaning staff. She quickly left the scene with documents about the plastic prison. The janitor saw her and was confused because his mother never told him that he had a twin brother. Meanwhile, Professor X was worried about the safety of Storm and Jean, so he visited Magneto in the plastic prison to ask if he was involved in the assassination of the president. However, Professor X was surprised to discover that Magneto had been manipulated by Stryker. Professor X had not yet recovered from his surprise when the prison suddenly released anesthetic gas. He wanted to call Cyclops for help, but it was too late. Outside, Cyclops noticed something unusual. He rushed in to save the professor, but he was suddenly attacked by Stryker's assistant, and he fainted on the spot. Meanwhile, Stryker led a special force to attack the academy while the main members of the X-Men were absent. The only one strong enough to fight at the moment was Wolverine. Wolverine quickly dealt with the soldiers on the spot. After dealing with the soldiers, Wolverine walked out of the room and continued to defeat the enemy. Cyclops woke up and immediately transformed. He used his tough body and overwhelming strength to quickly defeat the guards. He then led the remaining students out through the fire escape. Facing them, increasing enemy force, Wolverine was ready for a fight. However, when he saw Stryker, he immediately retracted his claws because he was so eager to know the truth about his past. At this moment, an ice wall appeared. It turned out that Iceman had returned to save him. Wolverine had to retreat with the others. After taking control of the academy, Stryker went to the mutant search room and took the equipment inside. When Professor X woke up, he found himself being held in a secret base. Stryker also revealed his plot to Professor X. He intended to use the power of Professor X and his son to create terrifying hallucinations. The goal was to destroy all mutants in the world. It turned out that his son was also a mutant, and Jason possessed the ability to create powerful hallucinations. Because of this power, Stryker's wife was tortured to death by Jason. Since then, Stryker harbored hatred and resentment toward all mutants. To achieve his goal, Stryker did not hesitate to torture Jason. Then he extracted hallucinogenic substances from his son's brain. The reason he captured Professor X was because he had the ability to connect with the minds of all mutants through Manx, a brainwave amplifier. In addition, Stryker was also performing cruel experiments on other mutants, just like what he had done to Wolverine. However, there was an element in his plan that he did not foresee. That was Magneto. With the documents about the plastic prison in hand, Mystique disguised herself as an attractive blonde girl. She quickly seduced a guard of the plastic prison. The two staggered from the hall to the restroom. Then the guard suddenly fainted. Mystique immediately revealed her true form. She injected a quantity of liquid metal into into his body, then she left. The next day, when this guard brought food to Magneto, he suddenly smiled strangely. Because he finally felt the presence of metal, Magneto just waved his hand. The guard was immediately suspended in the air. Metal and blood tore the guard's body apart. With 3 iron bullets, Magneto easily destroyed the prison door. Outside, another guard discovered something was wrong and quickly retracted the connecting corridor. However, this did not make it difficult for Magneto. He used his powers and successfully escaped from the plastic prison. In another development, Wolverine and his teammates escaped to Washington. They were taking refuge at Iceman's house. It was unexpected that Iceman's younger brother harbored resentment toward the mutants, so he secretly reported their location to the police. Immediately, the police surrounded Iceman's house. Fortunately, Storm flew a fighter jet in time to rescue everyone. However, shortly after taking off, they were stopped by the Air Force. Storm immediately used her superpowers. In just a moment, the sky was covered with thick, black clouds, and thousands of tornadoes began to roll in. Although they had escaped the police's pursuit, 2 missiles were still chasing them. In the midst of the danger, Jean's power began to awaken. Immediately, this power disabled 1 missile, but the other missile destroyed part of the plane's cabin. Rouge was sucked out. Nightcrawler quickly reacted. He used his teleportation ability to save her. The plane lost power and began to plummet. While everyone thought they were about to die, suddenly, the tail of the plane repaired itself. Immediately, the plane miraculously stopped in mid-air. The person with this ability was Magneto. It turned out that after escaping from prison, Magneto had found out Stryker's plot from Mystique, so he decided to ally with Storm and the others to stop Stryker's plan to destroy mutants. While facing death, everyone was forced to temporarily put aside all personal grudges. Jean read Nightcrawler's memories and determined the location of Stryker's base. This base was the military barracks that Wolverine had once visited. The base was hidden deep underground. To enter the base, they had to go through a sewer. If Stryker detected an intruder, he would release water into the tunnel, so someone needed to go in first to turn off the water valve. At this time, Wolverine volunteered. After meeting Stryker the last time, he realized that Stryker had no intention of killing him. Sure enough, when Stryker saw Wolverine in the sewer, he did not order Wolverine to be killed, but he ordered his subordinates to take him inside. However, when saw Wolverine's eyes, he realized he had been tricked. Mystique quickly escaped from the bondage and defeated the bodyguard. Then she quickly ran to the control room to close the water valve. When the water valve was closed, Magneto and the others entered the base easily. Stryker realized the situation was not good, so he and his assistant ran to the brainwave amplifier. Then, he immediately ordered Jason to create an illusion to trick Professor X into connecting with all the mutants. When the experiment officially began, Stryker immediately began the plan to escape the base. At this time, Magneto's group split up to act. Cyclops and Storm went to rescue the imprisoned mutant children, while Mystique and Jean rescued Professor X. Wolverine sneaked out of everyone to find Stryker alone. He wanted to discover the truth about his past. Rouge and the others stayed on the plane to guard. On the way to the brainwave amplifier, Magneto's group met Cyclops. At this time, Cyclops was controlled by Stryker. Jean told the two to leave first, while she stayed to confront Cyclops. Immediately after, Jean and Cyclops rushed into battle. Cyclops' laser accidentally activated Jean's inner power, so the two were thrown away. Fortunately, Cyclops woke up, but the huge energy broke the dam. Water began to flood the base. Water pressure skyrocketed, and the whole base was in a very dangerous state. Stryker realized this, so he hurriedly fled with his assistant. On this side, Wolverine, while searching, got lost in a secret laboratory. Looking at the giant water tank in front of him and the molten adamantium metal, Wolverine was suddenly surprised. Memories from the past began to appear in his mind. At that moment, Stryker passed by Wolverine. Immediately, Wolverine was furious and rushed forward. He was determined to kill Stryker on the spot. However, Stryker's assistant easily defeated him. It turned out that this female assistant was just like Wolverine. She had been transformed by Stryker into a mutant with claws. Her spin almost seriously injured Wolverine. Faced with the cruel moves, Wolverine had no chance to fight back, and he was quickly defeated. After standing up, Wolverine found a chance to fight back, and without hesitation, he launched a fatal blow. But what he did not expect was that the female assistant also had the same ability to heal herself as him. She pulled out Wolverine's claws, then she kicked to escape the control. Immediately after that, she started a series of attacks to destroy Wolverine. In a dangerous situation, Wolverine quickly grabbed a syringe and stabbed the female assistant. In just a few seconds, adamantium metal flooded her body. Finally, the female assistant could not bear it and turned into an adamantium corpse. Meanwhile, Professor X had connected with all the mutants who were attacked fell down and could not move. Only Magneto, thanks to his special helmet, could resist this control. He used all his strength and used the magnetic field to turn off the brainwave amplifier. However, Magneto still harbored the intention of destroying humanity. He took this opportunity to order Mystique to pretend to be Stryker to manipulate Jason. Then he asked Professor X to connect with all the brains of humanity for purification. After completing this, Magneto and Mystique quickly left the base. At this time, Wolverine had time to chase Stryker. He wanted to retrieve the lost memories from Stryker, but the dam had begun to collapse in the distance, so Wolverine had to tie Stryker to the plane while he went to save his teammates inside. However, unexpectedly, Magneto, who was escaping, accidentally saw Stryker, so Magneto killed him. Then Magneto and Mystique boarded the helicopter to escape the base. On the other side, everyone also noticed something unusual. Nightcrawler took Storm and teleported into the brainwave amplifier room. There they saw a young girl. Storm knew that the girl had fallen into a hallucination, so she immediately created an ice storm to freeze Jason. Professor X was also freed at this time. However, water began to flood in and the base was about to collapse. Everyone rushed out. On the way, they met Wolverine, who had just returned to the base. Under Wolverine's guidance, everyone finally escaped the base. When boarding the warship and checking the number of people, Wolverine discovered that Pyro had disappeared. Rouge said that he had followed Magneto. Pyro's betrayal also proved that fire and ice can never be compatible. When everyone prepared to drive the ship away, they discovered that the engine had broken. The situation became worse when water from the dam flooded down. The situation became extremely dangerous. At this moment, Jean used all her power to lift the plane into the air, while she was completely submerged in the strong water current. Professor X then met with the president. He handed over the criminal evidence he found in Stryker's office. From then on, the conflict between humans and mutants was temporarily resolved. The world experienced a brief period of peace. Magneto was still hiding somewhere with his evil intentions. Before that, Jean had released the Phoenix power while trying to save Professor X and the others. But in the end, Jean was drowned in the sea. Jean's sacrifice caused Cyclops great pain. Every day he kept thinking about her. However, one day, Jean's voice suddenly rang in Cyclops's head. Without hesitation, he rushed to the place where Jean had sacrificed herself. When he reached the lake shore, Jean's voice rang again. In his grief, Cyclops exploded. Immediately after, a large tornado suddenly appeared on the lake surface. A powerful energy source erupted from the lake. When Cyclops stood up again, he saw an unbelievable sight. Jean, who he thought was dead, was now standing intact in front of him. The only difference was that her hair was longer. Not only that, she could still control Cyclops' laser beam. Before he could understand everything, Cyclops was immersed in the joy of being reunited with his lover. However, he did not know that Jean had now become extremely dangerous. Professor X sensed something unusual. He immediately sent Wolverine and Storm to investigate. When they reached the lake shore, they discovered that the surrounding rocks were floating, as if the place had lost gravity. Wolverine only found Cyclops' glasses, while Storm discovered that Jean had revived by the lake shore. They quickly brought her back to the X Academy. After examining her, Professor X understood why Jean was alive. The psychic energy in her body had protected her. The professor also revealed a shocking piece of information. Jean was the only level 5 mutant he had ever met, and she has the power to destroy the world. To prevent that power from getting out of control, Professor X had sealed it with a spiritual barrier when Jean was young. However, when she escaped the seal, Jean immediately formed another personality. It was a personality full of anger and lust, and this personality only knew destruction. It was called the Black Phoenix. To avoid the disaster caused by the Black Phoenix, Professor X tried to use the spiritual barrier to seal her. After Professor X left, Jean also woke up, but she immediately demanded to hug and kiss Wolverine. Seeing that Wolverine refused to cooperate, Jean pushed him into the wall. It seemed that Professor X's seal was no longer effective, and the Black Phoenix personality was officially awakened. At the same time, the government captured a mutant named Leech. Leech's special ability was to turn any mutant who approached him back into a normal human. They used Leech's blood to create a drug that could erase mutant genes, and they announced that the injection of this drug was voluntary. When this news spread, it immediately caused a wave of protests in the mutant community. They gathered and prepared to organize large protests. As usual, Magneto became their leader. He decided to kill Leech to end the drug supply. Magneto's next plan was to find Mystique. She was arrested during the investigation of this drug. Among his new group of mutants, there was one who had the ability to teleport, and she could sense the location and level of mutants. With her help, Magneto quickly found Mystique. With his ability, Magneto not only saved Mystique, but also released released 2 powerful mutants. Grateful to Magneto, these 2 mutants did not hesitate to join his forces. At this time, a police officer woke up and he immediately shot Magneto with a drug. Seeing this, Mystique immediately rushed out to take the bullet for him. In just a moment, Mystique had completely become a normal person. Magneto realized that she was no longer valuable, so he abandoned her. Wolverine had been knocked out by Jean earlier. Now he had also woken up. When Professor X found out that the Dark Phoenix had awakened, he led Wolverine to Jean's house. Unexpectedly, they met Magneto's group there. It turned out that Magneto's teleportation subordinate had detected the powerful energy emanating from Jean. She immediately reported to Magneto. When he heard the appearance of a level 5 mutant, Magneto rushed to convince the opponent to join his side. Professor X and Magneto entered the room together. Both wanted to convince Jean to join their side. However, Jean's emotions were extremely unstable at this time. Professor X tried to calm her down with emotional words, but Magneto provoked her by saying that the professor just wanted to control her and intended to inject her with drugs. Finally, when Professor X mentioned Cyclops' death, Jean's emotions completely exploded. The power of the Dark Phoenix erupted, causing the entire house to float in the air. Wolverine tried to climb up with his claws to save Professor X, but when he opened the door, he saw a desperate scene. Professor X was easily defeated. It seemed that Jean had regained some of her sanity, but Magneto quickly took her away from this place. Looking at the empty wheelchair, Wolverine and Storm felt extremely painful. Everyone held a solemn funeral for the professor. Although he was no longer there, his will to preserve peace would continue to be inherited by his students. While everyone was holding the memorial, Wolverine suddenly heard Jean's voice echoing in. Therefore, he ignored his teammates' objections and fulfilled the professor's last wish, that was to bring Jean back to the academy. In another development, Magneto sent Fireboy to attack a drug prevention station, and he sent a warning to the government that if they did not stop the injection, terrorist attacks would happen every day. The president did not give up either. If Magneto wanted war, then the government would start a war. The army was very well prepared. They had abandoned all metal guns and replaced them with plastic guns that fired injections. The Great War between humans and mutants was inevitable. Magneto also began to give a speech to motivate mutants before the battle. He planned to attack Devil Island where the drug was produced, and kill Leech to stop the supply of serum for the drug. Meanwhile, Wolverine followed Jean's call and quietly went to a forest. However, before he could find Jean, he was ambushed by Magneto's subordinates. After defeating the subordinates, Wolverine disguised himself and infiltrated Magneto's army. With great difficulty, he met Jean, but before he could talk to Jean, Magneto appeared and nailed him to a tree. With a body made of metal, Wolverine was completely defenseless against Magneto. With just a gentle wave of his hand, Magneto threw Wolverine hundreds of meters away. In another development, Mystique took revenge on Magneto by revealing his location to the government. However, when the army surrounded the place, the radar showed that the mutants on the map gradually disappeared. It turned out that they were just illusions. At this time, Magneto led the mutant army near Devil Island. To help his army cross the sea, Magneto created a majestic scene. Magneto stretched out his hand, and the bridge's legs crumbled. Then he lifted the entire bridge into the air. The bridge slowly moved towards Devil Island. When the bridge was in the right position, Magneto flipped his hand and firmly placed the bridge on the island. Then Magneto led the mutant army to attack the human experimental facility. Juggernaut prepared to attack but was stopped by Magneto. He said that in chess, the pawn always goes first. The army used guns that shot genetically modified drugs, and if they were hit, the mutants would lose their special powers. Magneto tried to absorb all their guns with magnetism, but he found that it did not work. With the army's increased power, the mutant army had to continuously retreat. Taking that opportunity, the commander ordered 3 artillery shells to be launched with the determination to destroy all mutants. The bullets were fired densely, but Magneto remained calm. He used the iron plate to block the bullets easily. Then he ordered Callisto to use powers to counterattack. The army began to panic. In the critical moment, the X-Men warriors appeared at the right time. They stood in a line between humans and mutants. With Magneto's command, a superpower battle broke out. Wolverine and Hank rushed into the battlefield. Storm flew into the air to prepare to attack, but she was caught and defeated by Callisto. While everyone was fighting, Magneto ordered Juggernaut to kill Leech in the laboratory. However, Juggernaut's attack was too aggressive and reckless. Hank realized the enemy's intention, so he immediately sent Shadowcat to stop it. Kitty's ability is to be able to pass through solid objects. After escaping the restraint, Juggernaut immediately rushed at Kitty with a powerful attack. While running away, Shadowcat accidentally found Leech. However, when approaching him, Shadowcat lost her supernatural ability. At this time, Juggernaut also chased after him. him. Kitty suddenly thought of a plan. She intentionally used provocative words. Juggernaut, caught off guard, rushed at her. Taking that opportunity, Shadowcat pulled Leech aside. On the battlefield outside, Magneto started throwing burning cars. The soldiers were blown up and fled in all directions. Wolverine and the others had to temporarily hide. At this time, Wolverine discovered the gene potion on the ground and immediately thought of a countermeasure. He told Iceman to deal with Pyro. Although Pyro attacked fiercely, he could not overcome Iceman's intelligence. Iceman finally knocked Pyro unconscious with a headbutt. Wolverine told Storm to summon thick fog, then let Colossus throw him towards Magneto. As expected, Magneto easily held Wolverine down on the ground, but Magneto did not know that Wolverine was just a decoy, while the one who really delivered the fatal blow was Magneto. After being injected with the gene drug, Magneto returned to normal. Everyone thought the danger was over, but unexpectedly, the stupid humans suddenly attacked Jean. Jean was angry and unleashed the power of the Black Phoenix, and the real disaster begins here. Only then does Magneto realize how bad he has caused. Seeing the island about to collapse, Wolverine decides to risk his life. With his powerful self-healing ability, Wolverine approaches Jean. Wolverine knows that Jean is now completely controlled by the dark personality. To prevent the Black Phoenix from destroying the world, he is forced to kill Jean. Finally, the disaster officially ends. After everything is over, Storm takes over Professor X's position. Finally, mutants and humans have achieved peace. Magneto has now become a normal person. He plays chess in the park but accidentally uses his thoughts to move the chess pieces. This shows that the gene drug did not completely erase his abilities. Professor X has miraculously come back to life. During World War II, Japan accepted defeat. Officer Takeo Kameda was determined to end his life to keep his honor. However, at that moment, he saw the US military drop an atomic bomb in the distance. Soon after, a huge fire broke out. Kameda was going to die anyway, so he decided to end his life first. But suddenly Wolverine appeared and stopped him. The two ran and jumped into the deep well. When the fire broke out, Wolverine used the well cover to protect Kameda. Meanwhile, Wolverine was burned by the fire. When the fire died down, Kameda miraculously survived. Wolverine quickly regenerated his body thanks to his self-healing ability. Years passed, and Wolverine became a lonely wanderer because he was still haunted by the death he directly caused to Jean. During the day, he stayed with the bear. At night, he returned to the cave to rest. Every night, he dreamed of hurting Jean. That night, Wolverine was awakened by gunshots. When he arrived, he discovered that the bear that had been with him for many years had been killed by hunters. Wolverine was furious. He entered the bar to confront the hunters, and he swore that he would make them pay dearly. But just as Wolverine was about to strike, a red-haired Japanese woman stopped him. Wolverine had not yet understood her identity. She had already helped him defeat the hunters. Then the woman introduced herself to Wolverine. Her name was Yukio, and she had come from afar, on orders from her master, and her master was Yoshida. He was the man Wolverine had saved during World War II. Yoshida had now become the richest man in Japan. However, Yoshida was suffering from a terminal illness. Yukio told Wolverine that Yoshida hoped to see him one last time before he died. Wolverine was a little hesitant about this offer, but it was hard for him to refuse. Therefore, he went to Japan with Yukio. As soon as he entered the mansion, Wolverine was given a special Japanese welcome. After a while of being treated, Wolverine regained his handsome appearance. Later in a medical room, Wolverine finally met his old friend. Dr. Ian stood next to him and informed him that they only had 5 minutes to talk. However, the doctor's next words shocked Wolverine. He said that Wolverine had lived for hundreds of years, and he had experienced all the sufferings of the world. In return for saving Wolverine's life, he wanted to receive Wolverine's self-healing ability. Then he would replace Wolverine to endure the pain of eternal life. When Wolverine heard this, he was immediately angry. He said that he was here to see Yoshida off for the last time. However, he wanted to kill Wolverine. Wolverine turned around to leave. Seeing that, Yoshida immediately announced that he had left all his assets to his niece Mariko. He was afraid that after his death, someone would harm her, so he asked Wolverine to protect Mariko. It was clear that Wolverine did not want to be involved in their family's affairs. Then Yoshida summoned his son Shingen, and he severely reprimanded Shingen. He declared that Shingen would not inherit any property. That night, while Wolverine was sleeping, Dr. Ian suddenly kissed him. Green smoke came out of his mouth. Wolverine immediately felt something was wrong with his body. When he chased her to the door, he found that Yoshida had passed away. The next day at the funeral, Wolverine realized that everyone around was fully armed. It was obvious that they were not good people. Dr. Ian also watched everything. As Mariko was about to worship, Wolverine noticed that one of the monks had a tattoo covering his arm. He immediately realized that something was wrong. Wolverine approached and tried to lead Mariko away, but Mariko refused. However, the more Wolverine looked at the monks, the more more uneasy he felt. One of them pulled out a gun and shot Wolverine. The other monks also gradually revealed their aggressiveness. Immediately, the funeral became chaotic. Wolverine discovered that his ability to heal himself had strangely disappeared. When he saw Mariko being taken away, Wolverine tried to pull out his steel claws and fought fiercely with the criminals. However, due to his severe injuries, Wolverine was exhausted and was quickly surrounded. At this moment, an arrow flew in. Mariko's boyfriend appeared in time and saved Wolverine. Harada was assigned by Yoshida to secretly protect Mariko. After escaping danger, Wolverine took Mariko to hide under the gang's pursuit. They successfully boarded a train to escape. After calming down, Wolverine went to the restroom to check his body. He saw that his body was full of bullet wounds. This confused him. The ability to heal himself was his ability. He did not understand why it disappeared. So, strangely, as soon as he stepped out of the restroom, he saw a group of people wearing sunglasses blocking his way. Wolverine immediately realized their bad intentions. Without hesitation, he turned out his steel claws and attacked first. The battle between Wolverine and his enemies lasted from inside the train to outside. When Wolverine was about to hit an obstacle in front, he cleverly turned around and flew to the roof of the train. The assassin clinging to him was also pulled up to the roof of the train. The two sides looked at each other. When the assassin lowered his head, Wolverine suddenly jumped up. Seeing that, the assassin immediately jumped up as well. After the two switched positions, Wolverine pretended to attack his opponent. Thanks to that, he easily threw the assassin off the train. At this moment, another assassin appeared. Wolverine did not hesitate to turn around and rush at the assassin. After defeating the last enemy, Wolverine led Mariko to continue to escape. They went to a hotel to rest for the night. However, at night, a gang came to attack again. Wolverine was not careful and fell from a high floor onto the street. Two thugs on the street used electric guns to brutally torture Wolverine. Just as one assassin was about to finish Wolverine off, Mariko threw a dart and knocked him out. Wolverine also quickly knocked out the other assassin with the electric gun he stole. After finishing off all the assassins, Wolverine was exhausted and passed out. When Wolverine opened his eyes again, he discovered that the bullets in his body had been removed. It turned out that the hotel owner's son was a veterinarian, and he had treated Wolverine. Mariko then took Wolverine to her house in the countryside to recover. In his spare time, Wolverine also worked with the sea people. When she saw Wolverine tired, Mariko always took care of him in time. Gradually, the two developed feelings for each other. On a stormy night, the two finally confirmed their relationship. The next morning, Wolverine heard a cry for help outside. He rushed out and discovered that Mariko had been kidnapped by the gang. Wolverine risked his life to chase after her, but was shot in the thigh. Although he captured a gang member, in the end, he could only helplessly watch Mariko being taken away. Wolverine angrily interrogated the captured assassin, and he discovered that the mastermind was Mariko's father. Wolverine could not believe this. In order to seize the inheritance, this man was willing to kill his own daughter. However, Shingen did not know that a group of ninjas had secretly killed all of his bodyguards. When he realized this, he was surrounded by the ninja group. The leader of the ninja team to save Mariko was her boyfriend. Unexpectedly, Dr. Ian also appeared at this time. It turned out that she was also a mutant. Her real name is Viper. She secretes a poison from her tongue that kills her opponents instantly. When Wolverine and Yukio arrived, they only saw corpses lying all over the room. A bodyguard also had a piece of paper on him. It said that if they wanted to save Mariko, they should go to the lab. Before leaving, Wolverine checked his body with a special device, and he discovered that there was a mechanical spider in his heart. Apparently, this was a gift that Viper gave Wolverine that night. In order to restore his ability to heal himself, Wolverine used his steel claws to cut open his stomach. He was determined to remove the spider from his body. At this moment, Shingen suddenly rushed in. Yukio fought with all his might to protect Wolverine. However, Shingen destroyed the device. Wolverine could only act on his feelings. Fortunately, the mechanical spider was successfully removed. Wolverine's wound also healed quickly, at an amazing speed. Just when Yukio was in danger, Wolverine had fully recovered. He quickly got up to continue fighting. He would not allow anyone to harm his teammates. Although Shingen was very skilled with the sword, Wolverine's self-healing ability was also extremely fast. After Wolverine suffered a few slashes, he kicked Shingen away. When he got up again, Shingen swung his sword like crazy. Finally, he launched a slash across Wolverine's side. Seeing Wolverine's self-healing ability, Shingen was extremely surprised. However, Wolverine spared his life. Unexpectedly, Shingen took the opportunity to sneak attack. At this time, Wolverine was no longer tolerant. He decided to finish off his opponent. Wolverine then took the address and prepared to save Mariko. But when he just approached the laboratory, he was blocked by Harada. It turned out that he had cooperated with Viper for a long time. However, what he did not know though, was that Wolverine had now restored his ability to heal himself. When he saw Wolverine's wound heal quickly, Harada was surprised. He immediately sent his ninja army to fight Wolverine. Facing this ninja army, Wolverine quickly fell into a difficult situation. In the critical moment, Yukio drove a snowplow to save him. She did everything to open a way out for Wolverine. After escaping the ninja encirclement, the car also stopped working. Wolverine told Yukio to get out of the car. Then he smoked a cigar and lit the enemy on fire, thinking that this time they would have no more obstacles. But they had not gone far when the archers behind began to attack fiercely. Harada also coated the arrows with a powerful poison. Wolverine was hit all over his back like a porcupine. He finally couldn't hold on any longer and collapsed to the ground. When Wolverine regained consciousness, he found his hands were tied to a chair. He looked around and saw a mechanical samurai made of adamantium next to him. At that moment, Viper suddenly appeared. She deliberately provoked Wolverine to attack her. Then she took the opportunity to lock onto his steel claws. At this moment, the mechanical samurai next to him suddenly stood up. It walked in front of Wolverine and pulled out its adamantium sword. It was clear that it was preparing to cut off Wolverine's steel claws. In the emergency, Mariko appeared in time. After escaping the bondage, Wolverine led Mariko to escape. Viper wanted to stop them, but Harada stabbed her in the heart with an arrow. However, for her, it was just a skin wound. Just peel off a layer of skin and she can regenerate. Then a mechanical samurai landed from the sky. Wolverine rushed at him and both sides fell to the floor below. He told Mariko to run away first, while he stayed to deal with the mechanical samurai. However, the strength of the two sides was too different. Wolverine fought back with all his might. The samurai pulled out a red sword from behind his back, and it cut off Wolverine's steel claws with just one slash. To avoid the samurai's fierce attack, Wolverine rolled over and unfortunately fell from above. As soon as he stood up, Viper sprayed venom in his face. Taking advantage of Wolverine's blurred vision, the samurai rolled over and attacked him again. In the emergency, Wolverine turned around and destroyed the surrounding electric grid. The entire laboratory was plunged into darkness. Wolverine took this opportunity to snatch the samurai's sword, and the two continued their fierce battle. However, Wolverine wondered why his sword did not have a heating function like the samurai's other sword. As a result, he could not cut his opponent and was kicked away. When Wolverine's remaining steel claw was about to be cut off, Harada suddenly shot an arrow through the samurai's head. However, Harada's next action was extremely confusing. Obviously, he was a marksman. However, he rushed into direct combat with the enemy, and as a result, he was defeated by the samurai. At this moment, Wolverine accidentally activated the red-hot sword. He used all his strength to cut off the samurai's head. Then he hugged the samurai and fell down together. When Wolverine was about to climb up, the samurai suddenly came to life. It cut off Wolverine's remaining steel claw with just one slash. Then he clamped Wolverine's two hands tightly and stabbed steel needles into his bone marrow. The pain made Wolverine scream miserably. But immediately after that, he almost forgot the pain, because inside the mechanical samurai was Yoshida. He was the one behind it all. He faked his death and had his granddaughter kidnapped just to lure Wolverine. Taking that opportunity, he easily took away his ability to regenerate. In no time, Wolverine was drained of strength, while Yoshida quickly regained his youthful appearance. When Wolverine was about to be exhausted, Mariko took the steel claw and stabbed her grandfather in the neck. Wolverine struggled to stand up. He tore off the samurai armor and sent his old friend to the other world. Mariko inherited the family fortune. From then on, she became the biggest tycoon in Japan. Wolverine also escaped from the haunting thoughts in his mind. In his dream, he said goodbye to Jean for the last time. When Wolverine passed through the airport security gate, the surrounding metals suddenly floated in the air. Wolverine immediately realized who had come. This elegant man, Magneto, had returned with full power. While Wolverine was still wondering about his intentions, he said that the dark forces were secretly rising. Humans were creating a weapon that could bring disaster to mutants. Then everyone around began to stand still. Wolverine turned his head to look back. The scene before his eyes completely shocked him. In the future world, humans had created robots called Sentinels. These robots would have the ability to copy the superpowers of mutants. Whether it was Sunspot's high heat energy or Iceman's ice attack, they would easily neutralize them. They could even turn their bodies into diamonds, rocks, or fire to defend against attacks. When facing the metal Colossus, they would transform into metal humans with higher density. One punch would crush Colossus's head. In the eyes of Sentinels, all mutants would be sheep waiting to be slaughtered. After many years of being hunted and slaughtered by Sentinels, the number of mutants left was very small. If this continued, the mutant community would sooner or later be destroyed. This small group of mutants was being hunted and killed by Sentinels. At this time, only Shadowcat and Bishop were hiding. When the Sentinel was was about to launch a final attack on them, the two suddenly disappeared, without a trace. At the same time, Professor X used his telepathic abilities to find Shadowcat's hiding place. He led his teammates to reinforce them, but strangely, Iceman and Sunspot, who had sacrificed themselves earlier, appeared here. All this mystery originated from a special ability of Shadowcat. It turned out that every time the Sentinel was about to attack, she would send Bishop's consciousness back to his body in the past. This helped him warn other mutants about the impending danger. This method of changing the past to reverse the future gave Professor X a plan to save mutants. The Sentinel program had been initiated by Dr. Bolivar Trask in the 70s. At that time, he was still a weapons expert. On the surface, he claimed to work for peace, but in reality, he secretly captured mutants and used them as experimental subjects. From there, he created the first generation of Sentinels. Mystique, wanting to avenge her dead teammates, broke into the White House alone, and she successfully assassinated Dr. Jax. However, she was later captured. She thought she could stop the Sentinel program, but she did not expect that she herself would become the fuel for the project. Humans took advantage of her DNA, and within a short 50 years, they created the ultimate Sentinels. In just half a year, these Sentinels brought disaster to mutants. The origin of everything started from the day Mystique assassinated Dr. Trask in 1973. Professor X thought that if they could just go back to that day and stop Mystique, then perhaps the current situation could be changed. However, Shadowcat said that if the consciousness was sent back several decades, it would be completely destroyed, and even Professor X's powerful brain could not bear it. So, Wolverine was the most suitable person to send the consciousness, because he had supernatural self-healing abilities. So, even if his consciousness was destroyed, he could still immediately restore it. Professor X told Wolverine that to stop Mystique, he needed to find young Magneto and cooperate with him. After arranging everything, Shadowcat began to transfer Wolverine's consciousness. When he opened his eyes again, his consciousness had returned to his body in 1973. At this time, because Wolverine had slept with the daughter of a gang leader, he was surrounded by his subordinates. Wolverine tried to open his claws and realized that he still had bone claws, because at this time, he had not been injected with adamantium. His healing ability was still amazing. After being shot a few times, he easily defeated his subordinates. Wolverine then went to the mutant school and met Professor X when he was young. At this time, Professor X was at the most desperate stage of his life. Not only had he lost Magneto and Mystique, but he had also lost the ability to walk. Even the students of the school had been forced to become soldiers in Thailand. He lived day by day in uncertainty and extreme depression. To help the professor stand up, Hank created a serum that could temporarily restore his life. However, the price was that his superhuman abilities would be inhibited. Wolverine told the professor that he had come from 50 years in the future and explained his purpose, but Professor X did not want to care. He still remembered the words of dismissal that Wolverine had said to him at the bar years earlier. This made Wolverine angry. After returning to his room, Professor X looked at the picture of Mystique. Countless memories of her surged through his mind. To him, Mystique was like his own sister. Because of Mystique, Professor X finally agreed to help Wolverine, but to stop Mystique's assassination, they needed a strong teammate, and that was Magneto. However, Magneto was currently being held in the 100th basement of the Pentagon because he had previously assassinated the U.S. President John F. Kennedy. To save him, Wolverine thought of a silver-haired man. That was Quicksilver. At that moment, he was suffering because he could not find a fellow. When he saw Wolverine reveal his claws, Quicksilver immediately agreed to help them. Inside the Pentagon, a prison guard was preparing to bring Magneto food. Suddenly, a strange wind blew his hat off. In a blink of an eye, the warden turned into a mummy. Quicksilver disguised himself as a warden and took the opportunity to sneak into Magneto's cell. He gave Magneto a piece of paper hidden in a bowl of rice. The content on it reminded him to pay attention to the glass above his head. Then Quicksilver held out his hands and started shaking them at high speed. Magneto told Quicksilver that in 3 seconds, there would be 20 guards shooting at them from behind the door. However, Quicksilver said that was exactly what he expected. Quicksilver took Magneto away with his super speed teleportation. Magneto even felt dizzy, and when he turned back to look at Quicksilver, he had changed into a new set of clothes. When the elevator opened, Professor X saw his old friend after a long time. The professor immediately rushed forward and punched Magneto in the face. While the two were arguing, a group of guards from outside rushed in and surrounded them. Magneto wanted to use his power to escape the siege, but Quicksilver did not give him a chance to show off. He put on his headphones and the signature theme music played. After saving Magneto, Quicksilver's mission ended. Next, Professor X and the others boarded a plane to Paris. At the same time, Mystique first discovered Dr. Trask was experimenting on mutants. She transformed into into his form. Then she sneaked into his office. There she found evidence of his crimes against mutants. She also found out from Trask's secretary that he would attend the Paris conference in 2 days. Therefore, she immediately went to a Shi'ar bar. There she seduced a Thai general. When she entered the private room, she revealed her true form and kicked the general to the ground. The next day, before the Paris conference began, Dr. Trask gathered military representatives from various countries. At the meeting, he presented his Sentinel weapon. He claimed that mutants were the new enemy of humanity, but conventional weapons could not deal with them. His Sentinel weapon not only had strong combat power, but it also had the ability to automatically identify mutants' X genes. However, when he turned on the gene detector, the red light immediately lit up. This meant that there were mutants hiding in the conference room. He slowly walked in front of the Thai general. The signal light immediately reached its maximum level. The general was certain that there was a mistake. However, Trask said that his machine had never been wrong. Seeing that she could no longer hide, Mystique immediately took down all the guards and revealed her true form. Then she did not hesitate to point her gun at Dr. Trask. At this time, Professor X and the others arrived at the scene. Mystique was distracted for a moment, and she was shot down by Stryker with a taser. Magneto quickly intervened to save her. When he saw the young Stryker lying on the ground, Wolverine could not help but recall painful memories of the past. But unexpectedly, Magneto held a gun and intended to kill Mystique because he thought that only in this way could the mutants be completely safe. Under Hank's protection, Mystique took the opportunity to jump out the window to escape. Magneto still used his power to control the bullet to hit Mystique's leg. Mystique quickly transformed into a passerby, but she still couldn't escape Magneto's gaze. In the moment of danger, Hank rushed in and knocked out Magneto. Thanks to that, Mystique had the opportunity to leave the scene. This action prevented Mystique from being captured, but the mutants also appeared in public for the first time. This caused panic across the country. After the president witnessed the fear of the mutants, he did not hesitate to approve the Dr. Sentinel program, and he also decided to organize a special exhibition for the Sentinel. However, they did not know that all of this was being monitored by Magneto. He approached the train transporting the Sentinel. Then he integrated the rails into the Sentinel's body. Thus, Magneto could easily control these Sentinels. Finally, Magneto took back his anti-intrusion helmet. Professor X and his teammates arrived at the scene of the Sentinel launch in Washington. Surprisingly, they passed the security checks smoothly. This made Wolverine happy. Professor X used his superhuman ability to search for Mystique in the crowd. At this time, the president stepped up to the podium to introduce the first generation of Sentinels. Meanwhile, Mystique, in the form of an official, silently approached Doc Bolivar. She waited for the opportunity to act. The moment she pulled out her gun, the professor used his telepathy to control her actions. While the two were arguing, on the other side, Magneto had already flown into the center of the stadium. When he opened his arms, the entire stadium was uprooted. At the same time, he also activated the Sentinels at the exhibition, and he controlled them to slowly rise into the air. A frantic attack was launched. Seeing the dire situation, the officials hurriedly escorted the president to the underground shelter. At this time, in the future world 50 years later, the Sentinels launched a final attack on the remaining mutants. The mutants fought with all their might, but they were still no match for the numbers. Storm, Bishop, Colossus, and Blink fell one by one under the Sentinels. The old and weak Magneto was seriously injured and dying. He could only use the last of his strength to block the door. This helped buy time for Professor X's team. Back to 50 years earlier, Magneto had used an entire stadium to surround the area of the ceremony. Then he descended from the sky. Only 4 Sentinels were left hovering, guarding the 4 sides. At this time, a Sentinel discovered Wolverine and Hank. However, Wolverine did not have adamantium claws at the moment, so he could not harm the Sentinel. In an emergency, Hank rushed forward and hugged the Sentinel tightly. This allowed Wolverine to stop Magneto. Wolverine thought that because he did not have adamantium, he would not be controlled by Magneto, but unexpectedly, he was knocked down by the rock behind him. Immediately after, Magneto pierced the steel bars through Wolverine's body. He turned him into a real steel werewolf. Magneto swung his arm and threw Wolverine into the lake in the distance. Then he opened his hands and pulled the underground tunnel to the surface. Next, he lifted the entire bunker off the ground and tore open the door with his bare hands. Under the watchful eyes of the media, Magneto criticized the crimes of humanity. He questioned why they were harming mutants. Now he wanted to use the president's life to declare mutant supremacy to the world. In a dangerous situation, Mystique transformed into the president and shot Magneto through the neck. Magneto collapsed to the ground, and he was completely unable to fight. Then Mystique tried to kill the doctor, but Professor X took control of her brain in time. Professor X told her that the future of mutants depended depended on her decision. If she killed him today, the fate of mutants in the future would not change. In the future world, Sentinels broke the last line of defense. They launched a strong attack on Professor X and the remaining people. In that critical moment, Mystique was finally moved by the professor. She put down the gun in her hand. In the future world, the professor and the others had also disappeared. It was clear that the future 50 years later had been successfully reversed, but Magneto was still stubborn. In the end, he still left them again. Wolverine then woke up from his coma. He found himself back at X school, but what surprised him was that his fallen teammates were all alive in front of him. Even Jean, whom he had been thinking about day and night, had come back to life. Unfortunately, her boyfriend had also returned. Then, through Wolverine's narration, Professor X also remembered the scene where they reversed the future together. They welcomed each other back. Although they had succeeded in changing the future, Wolverine's reformed fate remained unchanged. Because that year, after sinking to the bottom of the lake, Wolverine was still picked up by the young Colonel Stryker. In ancient Egypt, there was a mutant named Apocalypse. He claimed to be a god and ruled over everything. Everyone had to bow to him. No one knew how many years he had lived, because every time he was about to run out of life force, he would transfer his consciousness into the body of another mutant. From there, he obtained their superpowers. These powers could be accumulated indefinitely. This time, he wanted to transfer his consciousness into a mutant with strong self-healing abilities. The ceremony officially began. The spells in the pyramid under the sunlight slowly lit up. Apocalypse's consciousness began to transfer into a new body. Halfway through the ritual, a group of long-oppressed soldiers took the opportunity to rebel. They cut off the wooden pillars and sabotaged the structure of the pyramid. A large boulder slid into the tunnel. The spies inside hastily closed the secret room. Although they were easily killed by Apocalypse's 4 guardians, the large boulder destroyed all the supporting pillars. The entire pyramid began to shake and was about to collapse. The guardians were also crushed to death by the boulders one after another. At this time, Apocalypse's transformation ritual had reached a critical stage. The last guardian used all his strength before dying to create a protective shield for Apocalypse. Thus, Apocalypse was buried under the rubble. Several thousand years passed quickly. A CIA agent named Moira in Egypt accidentally discovered the tomb of Apocalypse. When she entered, she discovered a group of local believers trying to awaken Apocalypse. When the sunlight shone on the pyramid, the ancient spells emitted a brilliant golden light. After thousands of years of slumber, Apocalypse once again awakened. When he woke up, Apocalypse wandered the streets with a sense of loss. He discovered that the entire world had been dominated by humans. At this time, a mutant girl used her superpowers to steal money from a vendor. This girl was Storm when she was young. However, Storm had not run far before she was chased and captured by the vendors. The little girl was cornered in an alley. At this time, Apocalypse stepped forward. He gently waved his hand and immediately killed the opponent. Then he glanced, and the man was pinned to the wall. In return for saving Apocalypse's life, Storm took him home. At that time, Apocalypse still knew nothing about this world. He reached out to touch the television. In a moment, he saw nearly 1,000 years of human history, but he despised human domination. He decided to gather 4 guardians to regain dominance from mutants, and Storm became his first guardian. Apocalypse gave Storm greater power. Thanks to that, she became a level 4 mutant. Then they went to Cyclops, who had the ability to turn thoughts into weapons. Then, under Cyclops's introduction, they found the mutant Angel. Looking at his damaged wings, Apocalypse rolled his eyes. Then he gave Cyclops a pair of brand new metal wings. Now Apocalypse has gathered 3 guardians. The last person Apocalypse chose was Magneto. Since Wolverine reversed the future, Magneto's fate has also changed. He gave up confronting humans and chose to live in seclusion. Magneto has a beautiful wife and a lovely daughter. Their life passed very happily and peacefully. However, this happiness did not last long. In a dangerous situation, Magneto used his superpowers to save his colleagues. This action revealed his mutant identity. Magneto realized that he could not stay in this place any longer. So after returning home, he planned to escape with his wife and children at night. But at this time, his daughter had disappeared. When they entered the dense forest, the police had been waiting for a long time. In this situation, Magneto could only surrender. Helplessly, he begged them not to harm his family. But who would have thought that Magneto's daughter was also a mutant? She had the ability to summon countless birds. In the chaos, an arrow was accidentally shot. The arrow pierced the bodies of Magneto's wife and daughter. At this moment, Magneto was completely desperate. He hugged the bodies of his wife and daughter and cried. Then he quietly took off his daughter's necklace, and he was determined to make these people pay. Then he returned to the factory. Here, he blocked all the doors and windows. He wanted his colleagues who had betrayed him to pay for their actions. At this time, Apocalypse and the others appeared behind him. Apocalypse Apocalypse understood the importance of Magneto, so he did not hesitate to give a meeting gift. Next, Apocalypse brought Magneto back to his childhood nightmare. He found himself in a Jewish concentration camp. This was where his mother was tragically murdered. Remembering the death of his loved ones, Magneto's heart was even more painful. Taking this opportunity, Apocalypse persuaded Magneto to join his team. At the same time, Apocalypse also fully exploited the latent power in this suffering man's body. Magneto suddenly felt a familiar consciousness invade his mind. It was his old friend. Professor X knew about Apocalypse's resurrection, as well as the murder of Magneto's wife and daughter. He hoped that Magneto could wake up and not be enchanted by Apocalypse's lies. However, Magneto had lost faith in life. He had tried to integrate into the life of ordinary people. But once the mutants' identities were revealed, humans immediately persecuted them. Magneto no longer believed in this world. He was determined to wage war against the cruel humans. He vowed to avenge his dead wife and daughter. The best way was for Magneto to join Apocalypse and destroy humanity with him. Apocalypse quickly sensed the existence of Professor X and other mutants. He directly controlled the professor's cerebro remotely. Through this device, he observed humans all over the world. Then, he used the professor's ability to control the soldiers guarding nuclear weapons around the world. All nuclear missiles flew into the sky. Humans had lost their nuclear weapons, so they could no longer pose any threat to Apocalypse. This scene made even the old man Stanley, who had experienced many events, tremble with fear. In the critical moment, Professor X finally woke up. He quickly ordered Harvok to destroy the Cerebro, otherwise the world would fall into destruction. Not long after, Apocalypse led his team to the Mutant Academy run by Professor X. They took away the unconscious professor. While stopping Apocalypse, Harvok accidentally detonated a device, and at the moment of the explosion, everything around seemed to stop. At this moment, Quicksilver appeared again, except for Harvok, who was closest to the explosion. The other students were successfully rescued by Quicksilver. However, Professor X was still taken away by Apocalypse. At this time, a military helicopter landed from the sky. Everyone thought they came to rescue, but the person who came out was Colonel Stryker. He immediately ordered his subordinates to capture the mutants. Jean and some mutants luckily escaped behind the rubble. They used their superpowers to avoid the soldiers' inspection. Nightcrawler teleported Jean and Cyclops onto the plane. They planned to save the unconscious people, but they did not expect that the surrounding iron net could inhibit their superpowers. The three were taken to Stryker's secret base. Meanwhile, Apocalypse forced Professor X to broadcast a message to the whole world. He wanted to declare that the end of humanity had come, and mutants would hold the fate of the world. During the broadcast, the professor took the opportunity to send a coded message to Jean. Through it, he revealed his location to Jean. The urgent matter now was to quickly rescue Quicksilver and the captives. Then they would go together to save Professor X. Unexpectedly, they got lost in a restricted area, and here they accidentally opened the cage that had held Wolverine. After being transformed by Stryker, Wolverine had lost part of his memory. Due to having to endure brutal torture for a long time, Wolverine was extremely crazy. He destroyed the entire base alone. Stryker hurriedly boarded a helicopter to escape. Then Jean used her superpowers to help Wolverine restore his memory. After thanking her, Wolverine disappeared into the white snow. Then they successfully rescued Mystique and the others. Their next step was to go to Egypt to save Professor X. Meanwhile, Apocalypse had also made his final plan. Apocalypse was the oldest mutant on Earth. His power was limitless. With just a wave of his hand, all the buildings in the city immediately turned into sand and stone. When the dust and sand cleared, a majestic pyramid appeared. Apocalypse used sand to transform matter. Next, he created an anti-intrusion helmet to give to Magneto. After all, Magneto was an important tool for him to destroy the world. Apocalypse's purpose in building the pyramid was to transfer Professor X's consciousness into his mind. Once successful, he would possess Professor X's superpowers. From there, he could control the thoughts of all humanity. Magneto was not to be outdone. He wanted to use the magnetic field to destroy all metals on Earth. From there, he brought human civilization back to a period of desolation. While the situation became critical, the X-Men appeared in time. They divided into two groups. One group confronted Magneto, while the other group went to rescue Professor X. Nightcrawler used his teleportation ability to infiltrate the pyramid. Here, he began to search for traces of the professor. Meanwhile, Hank and the people fighting outside were blocked by Storm. Storm raised her two hands to lift the car and threw it at Hank and the others. Hank tried to block it. Cyclops took the opportunity to shoot a laser and knock down Storm. When they thought they had won, a car flew by unexpectedly. Cyclops cut the car in half with a laser. Luckily, Storm regained her composure and began to counterattack. Hank and the others could not resist. They could only dodge the attacks everywhere and fell into a a passive position. At the same time, the Apocalypse's transformation ceremony began. Under the sunlight, a stream of energy moved quickly towards the altar. Next, Professor X was lifted high and all his hair fell out. At the critical moment, Nightcrawler arrived in time. He used his teleportation ability to bring the professor back to the plane. Apocalypse's plan was thus foiled. He let out a terrible roar in anger. He rushed out of the pyramid to chase after Professor X, but Quicksilver blocked him. Quicksilver, with his extreme speed, launched a crazy attack on Apocalypse. However, Apocalypse was not an ordinary person. His eyes quickly caught Quicksilver's trajectory, and he easily held Quicksilver in place. Mystique wanted to attack Apocalypse by surprise, but Apocalypse's recovery ability was too terrifying. He counterattacked and restrained Mystique with the intention of forcing Professor X to appear to save his teammates. Professor X forcibly entered Apocalypse's mind. There, they began a psychic battle. At first, Professor X had the upper hand, but Apocalypse quickly regained control. When he was about to capture Professor X, two giant metal bars fell from the sky and blocked his path. It turned out that Magneto had changed his stance, and he decided to side with Professor X. Apocalypse was angry and thought that Magneto had betrayed him, but Magneto insisted that Cyclops had betrayed them. Magneto controlled the surrounding metal and launched a fierce attack on Apocalypse. Cyclops also quickly joined the battle. However, for Apocalypse, their attacks were insignificant. He both fended off the attacks and was able to torment the professor in the psychic world. But Apocalypse did not expect that there was someone even stronger. It was Jean. After she had awakened the power of the Black Phoenix, Jean entered Apocalypse's psychic world. Under Professor X's encouragement, Jean completely unleashed her hidden power. When he realized that Apocalypse was losing, Magneto took this opportunity to fix Apocalypse in place with metal around him. Apocalypse wanted to escape but was blocked by Storm with lightning. Finally, under Jean's fatal attack, Apocalypse turned to ashes. After the battle, the world returned to peace. Magneto and Jean used their superpowers to rebuild the new Mutant Academy. Although Magneto and Professor X had reconciled, Magneto still chose to leave because he liked a free life. Quicksilver and the others became the new generation of X-Men. They would continue to use their powers to protect peace for humanity and Earth. In 1992, an American spacecraft crashed in space. Receiving a rescue mission, the X-Men immediately flew a fighter jet to the rescue. When they arrived at the scene, they discovered a mass of matter erupting from the sun, slowly approaching the ship. This was an unknown type of energy and could pose a threat to mutants. Time was of the essence, so the X-Men had to quickly rescue the astronauts. Under the command of Mystique, Cyclops used a laser to destroy the ship's thrusters. This caused the ship to stop spinning immediately. Nightcrawler and Quicksilver then used their superpowers to enter the ship. Here they began a lightning rescue. After the rescue was completed, Mystique began to order the team to return, but at this time, a member of the team was still trapped in the spacecraft. When she saw that the ship was about to be burned down, Mystique decided to give up the rescue. However, Professor X said that they had to save all the astronauts, and they were not allowed to leave anyone behind. In a desperate situation, Nightcrawler had to bring Jean back into the ship. Here, Jean used her superpowers to prevent the ship from disintegrating. Nightcrawler also quickly found the commander. Just before they were about to return, a stream of fire suddenly attacked the ship. Nightcrawler only had time to bring the commander back, but Jean was completely covered by the stream of fire. When everyone thought she had sacrificed herself, Jean absorbed this energy stream. After the explosion, her body miraculously returned to normal. Seeing this, Nightcrawler teleported to bring Jean back to the ship. After confirming that she was okay, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The rescue mission was completed, and the team members were considered heroes by everyone. When they returned to the academy, Hank examined Jean's body. The results were shocking. Jean's energy had exceeded the measuring range of the device. However, Jean said she felt completely normal. Hank didn't pay much attention, so he let Jean leave. That evening, everyone celebrated the success of the rescue mission. Jean was reminded of the scene in space by the sparks before her eyes. She felt the energy in her body gradually losing control. The next second, Jean suddenly fainted on the ground and fell into a coma. Professor X entered Jean's mind to calm her down, but he suddenly saw a memory of her childhood. It turned out that when Jean was young, she had caused a car accident due to her out-of-control superpowers. This accident had caused her mother's death. Fearing Jean's power, her father had sought out Professor X in the hope of preventing his daughter from losing control again. Professor X had created a mental barrier for her to block out this painful memory. However, that barrier was now rapidly collapsing, and the car accident scene replayed in Jean's mind. At this moment, Jean suddenly woke up. She said that she heard her father's voice, and she thought that Professor X had deceived her. She angrily pushed Professor X out of her consciousness. Then, Jean relied on her memory hurry to find her childhood home. When the door opened, she saw that the person standing before her eyes was her father. However, there was no joy on her father's face. Even on the wall where the family photo was hung, there was no picture of her. At this moment, Jean's emotions began to explode. She questioned her father why he abandoned her. At this time, Professor X and the others had also arrived in town. Professor X wanted to convince Jean to return, but Jean was now controlled by anger. She thought that Professor X had deceived her to take advantage of her superpowers. At this moment, 3 police cars suddenly rushed from behind. Hearing the shrill siren, Jean was extremely agitated, and once again, she released a powerful energy. She waved her hand and threw all the police cars to the ground. Everyone wanted to stop her, but they discovered that their power was completely unable to confront her. Nightcrawler wanted to use his teleportation ability, but Jean easily held him in place. Even Quicksilver's speed was controlled by her. Storm's attacks were easily repelled by Jean. Seeing that everyone could not resist, Mystique slowly approached Jean. She wanted to use her feelings to influence Jean, but Jean's power was no longer under her control. Mystique was blown away by Jean's energy. Unfortunately, Mystique was pierced through the body by a wooden stick. Looking at Mystique dying, Jean could not believe what she had done to Mystique. Then Jean hurriedly left the scene. Seeing his lover die in front of him, Hank hugged her in extreme grief. On the other side, Jessica and her family were having dinner. Suddenly, she heard a dog barking non-stop, so she put down her chopsticks and went out to check. As a result, she saw a group of strange people. When she returned to the table, she seemed to have become a different person. She coldly killed her husband. Then she quickly found her kind on Earth. They were the Shi'ar, an alien race. Their purpose in coming to Earth was to steal the cosmic energy in Jean's body. If they could get this energy, they could restore their race. They could even conquer Earth. The next day, the Academy held a funeral for Mystique. Hank was in grief. He blamed Professor X for Mystique's death. He thought that Professor X had hidden Jean's identity, and that had led to her losing control of her emotions. Meanwhile, Jean had come to an island. This was Magneto's hideout. Magneto didn't know why Jean had come here, so he asked whose blood was on her. Jean stammered that she couldn't control her powers. At that moment, a group of soldiers appeared outside. They came to arrest Jean. Magneto decided to cover for Jean. He lied that she wasn't there. However, Jean confidently walked out. As soon as she appeared, she destroyed the military plane into pieces. Everyone was extremely afraid of her power. Jean continued to destroy another plane. Immediately intervened to stop her. Jean and Magneto confronted each other, but Jean did not feel any pressure. Magneto's face turned red when he had to withstand Jean's extraordinary power. He quickly warned the soldiers nearby to leave immediately, otherwise they would all die. Meanwhile, the plane was smoking. The soldiers ran to the plane in panic. Magneto waved his hand to send the plane into the sky. He himself was thrown dozens of meters away by Jean's energy. Magneto shouted at Jean to leave quickly. Jean had no choice but to leave the island. At night, Jean sought relief in a bar, but she encountered an alien disguised as Jessica. The other party called Jean's name directly. She also said that she knew what power was in Jean's body. Then she took Jean to another place. After entering the room, Jessica waved her hand, and the office immediately turned into a cosmic scene. Jessica told Jean that she had absorbed a pure and ultimate powerful energy in the universe. This type of energy had destroyed their planet, so they were always searching for this source of energy, and surprisingly, it chose Jean. Jessica said that she could help Jean control this energy. With this energy, they could create life in a new world. After listening to Jessica's persuasion for a while, Jean seemed to begin to believe it. At the same time, Hank went to Magneto. He informed Magneto about Mystique's death. It turned out that Mystique used to be Magneto's lover. Hearing this news, Magneto felt extremely pained. He returned to his room and put on his anti-intrusion helmet that he hadn't used for a long time, and he decided to go find Jean to take revenge. This scene was seen by Professor X. Although they were all in pain over Mystique's death, the professor still believed that Jean did not intentionally cause Mystique's death, so he decided to go and stop Magneto. With the help of Nightcrawler, everyone immediately teleported to Jean, but they had only gone a few steps when they ran into Magneto's group. Immediately, the two sides started fighting. Storm confronted the pigtailed man. Cyclops rushed to stop Hank. Magneto pulled a subway car directly from underground and rushed into the building. Magneto wanted to use the metal handrail to assassinate Jean, but the handrail under Jean's control became soft. Magneto did not expect that Jean's power had become so terrifying. Then Jean reached out, and Magneto's helmet began to deform, and it seemed that the pressure was about to crush his head. However, Jean spared him. She immediately knocked him out. Magneto fainted on the spot. Immediately after that, Professor X told Nightcrawler to move Magneto into the house. Jean punched Nightcrawler and knocked him unconscious. Then Jean used her power to control Professor X's legs. He was forced to walk up the stairs step by by step and come in front of Jean. This action was a humiliation for Professor X, but he did not blame her. He let Jean enter his mind. There he showed her memories from childhood to adulthood. When she was abandoned by her father, Professor X decided to adopt her. The professor has always devoted himself to playing the role of a father and taking care of her every bit of her life. Jean's kindness was finally awakened. She did not want to continue possessing this terrifying power, and she decided to transfer it to Jessica. As the energy transfer progressed, Jean's consciousness gradually disappeared. At this time, Jessica finally revealed her true purpose. It turned out that they wanted to use this energy to take over the Earth. After the energy was completely transferred, Jean would also die. Fortunately, Cyclops arrived in time and interrupted the energy transfer process between the two. At the same time, a large number of soldiers arrived at the scene. They held special weapons and subdued all the mutants, including the professor and Cyclops. All the mutants were then taken to a military train. When everyone woke up, they found themselves wearing a superpower suppressing collar around their necks. Professor X told Hank that the person who killed Mystique was not Jean. The cosmic energy in her body controlled her to do that. He hoped that everyone could unite to fight against the threat from the alien invaders. As expected by Professor X, when the train passed through the tunnel, a group of Shi'ar people climbed onto the roof of the train with sharp claws, and ordinary bullets could not hurt them. These soldiers did not listen to Professor X's advice. They were determined not to remove the collars. As a result, they were quickly massacred by the Shi'ar people. In the critical moment, one of the soldiers managed to free everyone from the collars. Immediately, the two sides began a fierce battle. Hank transformed into his original form. He roared and charged at the enemy. Storm released lightning and used the power of lightning to dispel the darkness. Nightcrawler was also agitated by this tense situation. He used his teleportation ability to move back and forth in the train cars and destroyed many Shi'ar. Magneto's attacks were also very graceful and smooth. At this time, the strongest warrior of the Shi'ar officially appeared. Jessica launched a powerful attack that knocked Hank unconscious on the spot. Storm's electric shock not only did not affect Jessica, but she also absorbed all the electric energy and returned it double. Magneto blocked the entrance to Jean's car behind. Then he controlled all the weapons to attack Jessica directly. However, even though he had fired all the bullets, he could not harm her. In the critical situation, Professor X finally entered Jean's mind. This time, Jean was calm and understood the professor's intentions. When Jessica broke Magneto's last line of defense, Jean completely awakened. At this time, Jean had complete control of her energy. She gently waved her hand, and the entire train began to rotate in the air. Meanwhile, Professor X and the others were protected by an invisible force. After landing safely, Jean's shining moment was also shown. The Shi'ar people in front of the Black Phoenix were just like ants. In just a few minutes, all the enemies had turned to dust. Suddenly, Jessica quickly rushed forward and held Jean tightly. She tried to absorb the energy in Jean's body, but the more she absorbed, the more she felt that her body could not bear this power. She wanted to escape but could not. Jean did not allow her to run away. As the energy spread, Jean discovered that her teammates were also affected. In order to avoid hurting everyone, Jean took Jessica into space. Then she used the awakened Phoenix power to turn Jessica into ashes. Finally, Jean was reborn. She turned into a real Phoenix. Now she continues to protect her teammates and world peace. In memory of Jean, Professor X decided to change the name of Xavier Academy to Jean Grey Academy. Hank became the new principal. Professor X retired and lived happily with his friend Magneto. There were countless heroes, but the most prominent was an anti-hero named Deadpool. He had the same healing ability as Wolverine. He was even immortal. Before the world knew him by his stage name Deadpool, his real name was Wayne. At that time, he was a retired mercenary. He specialized in helping women take revenge on bad men. Of course, he also had to receive a small fee from them. One day he met a beautiful girl in a bar. Her name was Vanessa. The two fell in love as soon as they met. However, on that Christmas Eve, Wayne suddenly fainted. After going to the doctor, he found out that he had terminal cancer. Wayne, in despair, did not want to affect his girlfriend's life. Therefore, he decided to leave her and face death on his own. That night, Wayne went to the bar to say goodbye to his friends, and here he unexpectedly met a mysterious man. This man said that he was a member of a special organization, and he had the ability to cure Wayne's illness. He could even give him extraordinary powers. At first, Wayne was skeptical about this, but he had no other choice. After a night of thinking, Wayne decided to give it a try. He went with the mysterious man to an underground laboratory. Only then did he discover that he had fallen into a trap. It turned out that this was an evil organization that specialized in tricking dying people into doing experiments. They tried to create superpowered slaves to sell to billionaires. Wayne underwent a series of brutal tortures to stimulate the mutant genes in his body. The person in charge of Ajax used different cruel methods to torture Wayne every day. There were times when Wayne was immersed in sub-zero ice water. There were times when Wayne had an electric current run through his entire body. However, Wayne thought that if he just gritted his teeth and endured, he might be able to cure his cancer. But Wayne didn't know that not everyone could become a superhero. His genes weren't compatible with the drug. Ajax realized that he was no longer valuable, so he threw Wayne into a hyperbaric chamber for a final test. If that still didn't activate Wayne's superpowers, then Wayne would have no choice but to wait for death. In the hyperbaric chamber, Wayne suffered terrible pain. His body was constantly necrotizing, and his appearance also changed horribly. But fortunately, his cancer was cured. When he looked in the mirror, he saw himself as a zombie. Wayne felt extremely desperate. When the staff approached, Wayne headbutted the other person, and he successfully stole a match. Waiting for everyone to leave the lab, Wayne lit a fire in the hyperbaric chamber to end his life. When the laboratory was burned down, an unexpected miracle happened. Wayne stood up from the hot fire. Then he fought fiercely with Ajax. However, Wayne did not know that Ajax was also an experimental product. Therefore, Ajax did not feel pain. He quickly gained the upper hand in the battle. Wayne could not resist. Ajax used a steel bar to pierce Wayne's body and cruelly pinned him to the ground. Wayne could not resist. He could only let the fire slowly consume him. In the end, the laboratory was burned to ashes, but Wayne miraculously survived again and even possessed an immortal body. Wayne was cured of cancer. He planned to go home to see his girlfriend, but because his appearance had changed, the people around him looked at him strangely. Wayne did not have the courage to meet his girlfriend with his current appearance. He went to his best friend's bar and told him everything that happened. After discussing, Wayne decided to go find Ajax. He planned to force Ajax to restore his handsome appearance. At the same time, he also gave himself a new name, Deadpool. Then Deadpool made himself a white costume with black glasses. However, he quickly realized a big problem. Every time he was shot, his white suit was dyed red with blood. This made him have to go to the laundromat frequently. To solve this problem, he decided to change to a red suit. Unexpectedly, after changing, he not only eliminated the inconvenience, but also increased his fighting power. In order to find clues about Ajax, Deadpool almost wiped out all the gangs in the city, but he still couldn't find any trace of Ajax until one day he met the mysterious man who tricked him into doing the experiment. Deadpool easily controlled him and forced him to reveal information about Ajax. Then Deadpool went to the road where Ajax often appeared. He jumped directly from the overpass and crashed into the enemy's car. He started a fierce battle. Deadpool was not only agile, but also had countless fighting ideas. For example, he stuffed a car lighter into the enemy's mouth. To increase the fun of fighting, he decided to use 12 bullets to destroy all the enemies at the scene. Deadpool jumped on the spot and did a somersault. Then 2 bullets were fired directly, killing 2 people. At this time, a killer on a motorcycle rushed straight towards Deadpool. He fired madly with a machine gun in his hand. The bullet went through Wayne's right hand and created a big hole. However, Deadpool did not feel any pain. Deadpool fired 3 bullets at the killer. Unfortunately, the enemy ran too fast and dodged all 3 bullets. When he saw the assassin about to escape, Deadpool felt extremely angry because there were not many bullets left in the magazine. Then he shot the enemy next to him in the head. Then he took advantage of his agility to provoke the enemy to shoot all the bullets. When the enemy discovered Deadpool's position, he was lying on the ground as if he was waiting. With just 1 shot, he took down the enemy. At this time, Deadpool only had 5 bullets left in his hand. Seeing that the enemy was about to throw a grenade, Deadpool fired the 5th bullet accurately. Then waves started dancing, but before he could celebrate for long, the enemy behind him suddenly attacked. Seeing Deadpool knocked down, the assassin immediately thought he was dead. When he approached to check, Deadpool shot him once. Then he struggled to get up and fired 2 more shots into the opponent's body. Even though he had only 1 bullet left and was facing the enemy's strong firepower, Deadpool was not afraid. He jumped up and did a somersault in the air, making a perfect shot through the brains of 3 people. When he was celebrating his victory again, the enemy behind him suddenly stood up. It turned out that the bullet had only taken down the 2 people in front and failed to pierce the last person. The opponent pulled out a dagger and charged at Deadpool, but Deadpool quickly pulled out the pair of swords on his back and stabbed the opponent's body forcefully. Then he lifted the opponent up high and decisively swung his arms. The opponent's body was immediately split into 2 halves. When Ajax's subordinates were completely destroyed, he got on his motorcycle to escape. Deadpool immediately threw the sword at him. After catching Ajax, Deadpool beat him up. Then he stabbed a knife through his body. Just as Deadpool was forcing Ajax to help him restore his appearance, Colossus of the X-Men suddenly appeared. Colossus immediately threw Deadpool several dozen meters away. way. They hoped Wayne could join the X-Men, but while the two sides were arguing, Ajax took the opportunity to escape. Deadpool angrily stood up and swung his fist hard at Colossus's face, but the opponent was not injured at all. On the contrary, Deadpool's right arm was broken. Then Deadpool used his other hand to punch Colossus's groin, but the result was that his left arm was also broken. Looking at his limp arms, Deadpool tried to counterattack, but his leg was also broken. Deadpool not only couldn't do anything to Colossus, but was also forced to leave. However, this special hero was not easily obedient. Deadpool decided to pull out a dagger and cut off his own arm. Then he quickly escaped the scene. Only Colossus was left looking at Deadpool's arm in confusion. No matter how damaged Deadpool's body was, he could quickly recover. Not long after, Deadpool grew a new small hand. In revenge, Ajax investigated Deadpool thoroughly. He even kidnapped Deadpool's girlfriend. To save his girlfriend, Deadpool brought out all the weapons in the house. He even humbled himself to ask Colossus for help. He promised that as long as Colossus helped him save his girlfriend, he would join the X-Men. Deadpool thought that with the support of Colossus and Sonic, they could easily defeat Ajax, but he didn't expect that the opponent also had a super strong female assassin. She was like a grim reaper, swooping down from above. Then she threw a punch that sent Colossus flying dozens of meters. Colossus stood up and continued fighting. With great difficulty, he found an opportunity to counterattack, but Colossus was suddenly attacked by his opponent in a vital area. He immediately fell to the ground. Realizing that Colossus was not a match either, Deadpool decided to take matters into his own hands. He pulled out the pair of swords from his back and quickly destroyed all of his opponents. At the same time, Deadpool's girlfriend was locked in a high-pressure chamber by Ajax. If he didn't quickly rescue her, her appearance would also be ruined. Deadpool held his pair of swords against Ajax's pair of axes. The two began a fierce battle. The strength of both sides was equal. To save his girlfriend, Deadpool used a sword to pierce the pressure chamber. In the situation of lacking weapons, Deadpool immediately fell into a weak position. He was stabbed in the head by Ajax. Although the wound was not life-threatening, his consciousness began to blur. Sonic realized that everyone was in danger, so she accumulated energy and jumped down from above. The explosive power shook everything around. Ajax was also hit by the container. Deadpool hurriedly brought his girlfriend into the pressure chamber. In the end, he saved her life. After landing, Deadpool beat Ajax up. He asked Ajax to restore his appearance. However, Ajax said that he would never be the same again. Hearing that, Deadpool felt devastated. Despite Colossus's objection, he directly shot and killed Ajax. But now with this ugly face, Deadpool did not dare to face his girlfriend. Fortunately, his girlfriend was not someone who cared about appearance. She took the initiative to remove Deadpool's mask. When she saw his true appearance, she not only did not panic, but also gently said that after a few drinks she would get used to it. From then on, the two continued to live a happy life together. Life became more interesting and surprising when Deadpool always thought of crazy things. One day he visited the zoo to interact with polar bears. After being revived, he went to a 100-meter-high building and drank a bottle of toilet cleaner. Then he danced and let himself fall freely from the building. It was hard to believe he was still alive. Deadpool had one last trick to do. First, he sprayed some air freshener. Then he lay down on the barrel of oil that he had prepared. Finally, he lit it up in style. 6 weeks ago, Deadpool and his girlfriend reunited, but he continued his work as an assassin. Relying on his immortal body, Deadpool went everywhere to kill bad guys, and he earned a lot of money from the killing job. However, this also made him enemies with gangs all over the world. One night, Deadpool and his girlfriend were enjoying some sweet moments together. Suddenly, Deadpool sensed danger approaching. He immediately told his girlfriend to hide. He held the pan to take all the attacks. Thanks to his agility and sword skills, Deadpool easily defeated 5 enemies. Then he worriedly asked about his girlfriend's condition. Suddenly, an assassin appeared from behind, and Deadpool's girlfriend was hit by a bullet and died instantly. Deadpool felt extremely miserable. He turned his despair into anger, broke the window, and jumped into the street. He rushed forward and knocked the assassin out of the car. Then he hugged the assassin tightly and sent him to the other world. The death of his girlfriend made Deadpool lose the meaning of life, so he did everything he could to end his life. When Colossus arrived at Deadpool's house, he only saw body parts everywhere. Colossus had to pack Deadpool's body and bring it back to the Mutant Academy. After being revived, again, Deadpool sat in the professor's wheelchair and ran everywhere. He also complained that there was no sign of a mutant in the Mutant Academy. Such a big house could only belong to Colossus. He didn't know that in the next room, everyone was having a meeting. Deadpool confessed to Colossus that he was the one who caused the death of his girlfriend. After listening, Colossus comforted him that this place could also be his home. With these warm words of comfort, Deadpool seemed to have found his place again. Very quickly, Deadpool received his first mission. That was to capture an out-of-control mutant named Rattlesnake. He possessed fire-type superpowers. During the confrontation, Rattlesnake threw Sonic hundreds of meters away. While Deadpool was still taunting him, Colossus, who was standing next to him, was blown away. Seeing the tense situation, Deadpool pulled out a gun to kill Rattlesnake. However, Colossus stopped him, because the first rule of an X-Men member is not to make a big deal out of the conflict. Deadpool could only try to calm Rattlesnake. However, Rattlesnake didn't listen at all. He turned around and sent Deadpool flying all the way to the 3rd floor. Deadpool jumped down. While Rattlesnake was off guard, Deadpool threw a knife and easily subdued him. Rattlesnake was given a collar that suppressed his superpowers by the police. This gave Deadpool an idea. He could die if he wore the collar. At this time, Deadpool discovered a wound on Rattlesnake's neck. After asking, he found out that Rattlesnake was abused by the principal every day. Deadpool felt indignant. Immediately, Deadpool shot and killed the principal's subordinate. Seeing that, Colossus quickly stopped Deadpool and blamed him for breaking the rules. However, Deadpool did not think so. He thought he was only fighting for what was right. Colossus was very disappointed with Deadpool's behavior. As a result, Deadpool was put on a collar. Then both he and Rattlesnake were sent to ice prison. The place held all mutants with terrible crimes. Deadpool was restrained by the collar, so every day he had to endure the pain of cancer. At the same time, he was bullied by longtime prisoners. He originally thought that he could achieve his wish of meeting his girlfriend in the afterlife. However, his plan was hindered by a surprise attack. Deadpool quickly led Rattlesnake to flee the scene. Unexpectedly, the attacker's target was Rattlesnake. The attacker's name was Cable, and he came from a future world. Cable was supposed to have a happy family, but one day a mutant, in a black cloak, broke into his house and brutally killed his wife and daughter. The culprit was Rattlesnake when he grew up. In order to revive his wife and children, Cable decided to use a time machine to go back to the past. Cable's plan was to kill Rattlesnake when he was young, thereby preventing tragedy from happening in the future. Without thinking much, Deadpool immediately rushed into battle with Cable. However, he had lost his superpowers. Therefore, his strength was weaker than that of a normal person. Deadpool could only do everything to protect Rattlesnake. Deadpool hugged Cable and rushed downstairs, and he successfully broke himself into 3 pieces. At the same time, his necklace was also thrown off. At this moment, he restored his immortal body. Deadpool hit Cable on the head with a stick. Then he attacked the opponent continuously. But soon Deadpool was beaten back by Cable. Deadpool really did not understand why the opponent wanted to kill a 14-year-old boy. Ignoring Deadpool's question, Cable used his mechanical arm to defeat Deadpool. Then Cable picked up the commemorative coin that Deadpool gave his girlfriend. Then he asked Deadpool why he wanted to protect Rattlesnake. Deadpool replied that he did not care about Rattlesnake at all. Hearing that, Rattlesnake was completely disappointed. Taking that opportunity, Deadpool detonated Cable's grenade. The two were blown out of the prison. They fell from the cliff to the foot of the mountain. Right when they fell off the cliff, Cable grabbed a rock in time and escaped death. Deadpool fell straight to the bottom of the icy lake. In his subconscious, he met his deceased girlfriend again. His girlfriend told him that he should put his heart on that boy. As soon as he finished speaking, Deadpool was immediately pulled back to reality. At the same time, his girlfriend's words also woke him up. Returning to the bar, Deadpool decided to find a way to save Rattlesnake. However, his friends reminded him that the strength of one person was not enough, so Deadpool decided to form a team. As the news spread, a few strange people volunteered to apply. There was a muscular man with the ability to control electromagnetic fields, including human brainwaves. He was immediately accepted into the team. A skinny guy with the superpower of spitting strong acid. Although he was quite disgusting, he was accepted. The next person was called, but was nowhere to be seen. Deadpool temporarily called him the Mute Invisible Man and accepted him into the team. Next was the guy with purple braids. He was simply an alien. Deadpool accepted him too. This curly-haired girl said that as long as her superpowers existed, no one could do anything to her. The last candidate was a middle-aged man with a big belly. Deadpool decided to accept them all. Since the prison was sabotaged, all the prisoners would be transferred. Deadpool took this opportunity to make a rescue plan. The group began to act. On the way, Deadpool gave the team an impressive name, X-Force. Their rescue plan was to parachute from the plane, then ambush the transport convoy. Next, they showed everyone what it was like to die right after landing. Deadpool was lucky to land safely, but his other teammates were not so lucky. The burly man landed on the front of the bus and died instantly. The alien boy had his eyes covered by long hair, so he landed on the plane's propeller. The invisible man was nowhere to be seen during the interview, but now he landed on an electric wire and was electrocuted to death. The middle-aged man landed safely. Meanwhile, the acid-spraying boy fell into the garbage truck, so the man wanted to step forward to help. As a result, he was sprayed with acid acid in his face. As a result, both of them died. While the mission had not yet begun, the entire team was almost completely destroyed. At this time, Amanda landed directly in the middle of the street. Her ability was to make vehicles automatically avoid the road. Then she closed her eyes and jumped, directly jumping into the passenger seat of the target car. Seeing this, the escort pulled out a gun and tried to shoot her in the face, but the result was that the gun jammed and could not shoot at all. Amanda kicked the escort out of the car and quickly took control of the car. At this time, a figure landed from the sky. It was Cable. With just a few jumps, he rushed into the trunk. Amanda did not hesitate to let go of the steering wheel and started a fierce fight with Cable. After a while of fighting, Amanda was knocked to the ground. At this time, Deadpool had slid to his butt. Seeing that Amanda was about to be shot in the head by Cable, he promptly came to her rescue. Then Amanda took over the task of driving the car. Deadpool confronted Cable. While the two were fighting fiercely, Rattlesnake took out a ballpoint pen and unlocked the electronic lock. A prisoner was released. With just one punch, this prisoner could smash the ground. Everyone was in a state of weightlessness. Only Deadpool and Amanda were not worried. After standing up, Deadpool turned his head. Seeing the terrifying helmet, Deadpool was shocked on the spot. This giant was Juggernaut. He was once imprisoned in the isolated area of the ice prison. Since Rattlesnake was disappointed in Deadpool, he often brought food to Juggernaut, so Juggernaut listened to him. As soon as he stepped forward, Juggernaut tore Deadpool into 2 pieces. Then Vassal led Juggernaut away to take revenge on the principal. Deadpool was carried by Amanda to the blind lady's house. Cable also followed closely behind, but this time he came to offer cooperation. He told Deadpool about Rattlesnake's cruel behavior when he grew up. After killing the principal, Rattlesnake tasted the pleasure of revenge. Then he went crazy. Cable's wife and daughter died tragically at his hands. Cable thought that when he returned to kill Sasuke, he could prevent the tragedy from happening, but the appearance of Jujutsu ruined the plan. Cable alone could not defeat such a strong enemy, so he could only seek cooperation. After listening, Deadpool sympathized with him. He walked to Cable with his legs that were in the process of regenerating. The two shook hands and cooperated. However, Deadpool had one condition. That was, Cable had to give him a chance to change Rattlesnake. Then everyone began to gather. Deadpool once again came to the Mutant Academy. He wanted to ask for Colossus's help. However, since the last time, Colossus was completely disappointed in him, so Colossus coldly refused Deadpool's request. When everyone arrived at the orphanage, Rattlesnake and Juggernaut arrived first. Deadpool wanted to step forward to stop them, but when Rattlesnake saw the principal, he immediately became angry. He launched a powerful attack that broke the door. Then he chased after the principal and attacked fiercely. Juggernaut stood outside the door to block everyone. Juggernaut was completely unharmed in the face of their barrage of bullets. Juggernaut fought alone against 3 people, but had the upper hand. Deadpool was stabbed in the head. In his dream, he saw a familiar figure. That person was Colossus. Although Colossus was disappointed in Deadpool, he always appeared in time to save his friend whenever there was danger. Perhaps this was true friendship. When Deadpool was hugged, he started to act spoiled. Colossus immediately pulled the steel bar on Deadpool's head. Then he left alone to confront Juggernaut. Deadpool did not forget to cheer for his friend. Although Colossus seemed very strong, after only a few rounds, he was beaten continuously. But then Colossus also found a way to counterattack. One of Colossus's steel teeth was knocked out. Yukio and Sonic worked together to temporarily imprison Juggernaut in the water tank. On the other side, Rattlesnake found the principal. Deadpool tried his best to stop him, but in Rattlesnake's eyes, there was only hatred. One attack sent both Deadpool and the principal flying. Seeing that Rattlesnake had completely lost control, Deadpool decided to put the mutant inhibiting necklace back on. He wanted to use his human body to influence the opponent's hateful heart. Cable stood by, worried that something would happen, so he quickly pulled the trigger and shot Rattlesnake. Deadpool, regardless of everything, rushed forward to take the bullet for Rattlesnake. Only then did Rattlesnake come to his senses. He realized that there were still people in the world who truly cared about him. The hatred in Rattlesnake's heart instantly disappeared. Cable's teddy bear was no longer gray. It seemed that the disaster in the future had changed. At this moment, Deadpool had no more regrets. In his dying moments, he finally crossed the barrier to hug his girlfriend tightly in his arms. However, his girlfriend told him that then was not the time. The people behind him needed him. As soon as she finished speaking, Deadpool was pulled back to reality. It turned out that Cable had given up the chance to return home. He used the time travel device to go back before the battle. Then he put a coin in Deadpool's chest. This small change not only saved Deadpool's life, but also did not change the course of history. The principal was also accidentally hit and killed by a car. From then on, Deadpool had a new family. Sonic had repaired the time travel device. Deadpool took the opportunity to return returned to the past, he swung his sword to kill the assassin, and thus he was able to change his girlfriend's fate. Seeing Wolverine pull out his claws, Deadpool immediately announced that he was just cleaning up the timeline. Finally, he went directly to the real world. Then he shot himself in the head while preparing to receive the Green Lantern script. Time passed quickly. Wolverine had now become a frail, old tech driver. At the age of 197, his eyesight was blurred. He put on his reading glasses and walked unsteadily. His steel claws were rusted, and he had to use his other hand to pull them out. And Professor X had now become a forgetful old man. He suffered from Alzheimer's disease, and his muscles atrophied. One night a year ago, the professor suddenly fell ill at school. His powerful mental energy waves took the lives of 7 members of the X-Men, along with 600 innocent people nearby. This incident made him the most wanted criminal of the government. From that incident, only Professor X and Wolverine survived. The professor often had seizures when he fell ill. All the people around him were affected by his brainwaves. They all had seizures. Therefore, Wolverine could only use sedatives to control Professor X's illness. It had been 25 years since a new mutant appeared in the world. The old mutants were dead or missing. The remaining mutants became outcasts. In order to avoid being hunted by humans, they could only hide their identities. Not knowing when, Wolverine had an extra adamantium bullet in his pocket. He left this bullet for himself because he knew that only the adamantium bullet could help him leave this life. One day, a nurse came to Wolverine and begged him for help. That night, Wolverine followed the address the nurse gave him to a dilapidated motel. The nurse had been waiting there for a long time. She knew very well about Wolverine's identity and abilities. As soon as he arrived, she gave him $20,000. She wanted him to escort her and a young girl named Laura to a safe place on the border. That place was called Eden. Although Wolverine felt something was wrong, but because he needed money to take care of Professor X, he reluctantly agreed with the nurse. Unexpectedly, the next morning the nurse was murdered in the motel, and Laura was also missing. Wolverine was worried that he would get into trouble, so he hurriedly returned to his place and prepared to take the professor to hide. But when he opened the trunk, he found a backpack and a ball. When he entered the house, he found that Laura had been sitting next to the professor for a while. It turned out that the professor had used his psychic ability to call Laura here. Wolverine felt uneasy when he saw this scene. Sure enough, an armed group quickly found their hiding place. Wolverine put the professor in the car to escape, but his car was quickly surrounded by enemies. The large number of enemies quickly controlled Wolverine. Then they sent a small group to capture Laura. In the warehouse, Laura was still calmly eating cereal. She was completely fearless of the intruder. Soon the warehouse echoed with screams. When Laura walked out of the warehouse alone, the group of people outside were all scared and trembling in her presence. Just when Wolverine was confused, he saw Laura's sharp claws protruding from her hands. In just a few attacks, Laura had defeated countless enemies. The little girl had amazing fighting abilities. However, in an alley, Laura was captured. Seeing this, Wolverine rushed to rescue her. Who would have thought that Laura also had claws on her feet? When he saw Laura escape from the control of the enemy, Wolverine quickly returned to the car. He stepped on the gas and sped away. Laura flipped over and jumped on top of the car. Then, she jumped into the car through the sunroof. Wolverine drove away while the enemy chased closely behind. When the car approached the rails, Wolverine performed a great driving trick. Thanks to that, he completely escaped the enemy's pursuit. While running away, Wolverine finally discovered the truth from the nurse's phone. It turned out that there was a research institute that used mutant genes to create a generation of young mutants, and Laura's genes were from Wolverine, so Laura had the same ability as him. Biologically, Laura was his daughter. Wolverine then watched a video that the nurse had intentionally recorded. Feeling guilty, she led everyone to escape from the research institute. However, this led to her death. The nurse had begged Wolverine to give Laura a coordinate. She claimed that it was a safe base for mutants, but after investigating, Wolverine discovered that the base came from a comic book. The book tells the stories of X-Men. In it, the author imagined a safe base, but the nurse believed that it really existed. Wolverine was confused about this. He intended to tell everything to Professor X, but when he just went down to the hotel, he discovered that a group of mercenaries had surrounded the place. He intended to leave quietly, but before he could move, a powerful brainwave came. Everyone in the hotel was paralyzed. No one could move. Wolverine knew clearly that this was because the professor had lost control again. He dug his claws into the wall and moved step by step to the front door of the room. He quickly defeated the guards at the door. Then he quickly killed all the mercenaries. Finally, he injected the professor with a sedative. Immediately, everything around him returned to normal. Wolverine hurriedly took the professor away. Seeing the innocent people injured, the professor could only apologize endlessly. His expression was like a child who had just just done something wrong. They continued their journey north. On the way, they met a farmer's family. The family's horses were panicking. Professor X used a little of his power to calm the horses down. Wolverine got out of the car and helped the farmer's family push the car. To show their gratitude, the farmer family invited Wolverine's group to their home for dinner. That night, they had a rare warm moment as a family. At night, Wolverine went out to help the homeowner fix the plumbing. Meanwhile, the professor rested in his room. Hearing Wolverine's return, he confided that he understood the pain Wolverine had to endure. However, in response to his confession, sharp claws stabbed into his chest. The person in front of him was not Wolverine. He was a murderer who looked exactly like Wolverine. He was the ultimate weapon of the research institute. He killed the entire farmer family and kidnapped Laura. When Wolverine returned, he saw a copy of himself, and he thought he was hallucinating. He rushed into the professor's room and found him dying. Wolverine stopped the professor's bleeding while repeatedly saying that it was not him. When Wolverine put the professor in the car, the professor did not have much time left. He looked at Wolverine and talked about the life they had dreamed of by the sea, and finally, he smiled gently and closed his eyes. Wolverine felt extreme pain. He roared like a wild animal. He rushed to attack X-24 madly. However, X-24 was a younger version of Wolverine. He not only possessed great self-healing abilities, but his fighting power was much stronger than Wolverine's. At the same time, he was also more cruel than the original. In no time, X-24 had defeated Wolverine and was about to kill him. Suddenly, a car rushed forward and knocked X-24 off his feet. The driver was the dying farmer. He shot X-24's head off. Then he turned around to shoot Wolverine, but he found that his gun was out of bullets. Soon after, he also collapsed to the ground and died in frustration. Wolverine once again had to face his lonely fate. He then took Laura and the professor's body away from this place. However, as soon as they left, the Institute's doctor used the mutation serum to revive X-24. In the middle of the lush green forest, Wolverine buried the professor, whom he considered his father, with his own hands. He wanted to say a few goodbyes to him, but in the end, he could only say that this place could be called near the sea. Wolverine knew that the professor always wanted to enjoy his old age by the sea, but in the end, he died so tragically. Thinking about that, Wolverine's heart was torn apart. He smashed the iron shovel madly on the car to vent all the pain and dissatisfaction in his heart. Then Wolverine and Laura continued their journey. At this time, Wolverine's body was no longer as good as before. The wounds on his body did not heal by themselves. He could only rely on his will to continue, until he could not bear it anymore. He stopped the car and fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up, he found himself lying on a raised platform. It turned out that this was the place called Eden. The people in front of him had all escaped from the research institute. Looking at their innocent smiles, Wolverine fainted again. Wolverine was then treated with a mutant serum. Thanks to that, he regained some of his ability to heal himself. When dusk came, Wolverine woke up from his nightmare. Laura sat quietly beside him. She gave him the alloy bullet that he always kept hidden. Then she asked him about the purpose of this bullet. Wolverine took the bullet. He told her that only this bullet could kill him. Laura wanted him to go with everyone to the shelter on the border, but Wolverine refused, because he knew that he would bring disaster to others. Those close to him were all unlucky, and he gradually accepted this fact. To protect everyone, he could only stay away from them. After saying that, Wolverine fell into a deep sleep again. Laura quietly took the bullet from his hand. The next day, Wolverine woke up. Laura and her friends had all left. They left Wolverine a vial of serum. Wolverine went to a high hill to watch people leave. Suddenly, several drones flew over. Wolverine began to feel uneasy. He used binoculars to look in the direction where people were running. The mercenaries were chasing them. He knew he had to go save them. Wolverine took the vial of serum and chased after them with all his might, but he had not run far when he collapsed to the ground from exhaustion. Seeing the children being captured one by one, Wolverine took out the vial of serum. Without hesitation, he injected the entire serum into his body. In that moment, he felt a familiar power. It was the power of Wolverine that he was proud of. This was the first time he fought like a father to protect his children, and this was probably also the last time he fought like a wild animal. Wolverine soon found Laura. He and his little daughter together destroyed the mercenaries. However, the effect of the serum did not last long. Wolverine soon felt the weakness and pain in his body again. At this moment, the doctor of the research institute appeared. He laughed at Wolverine's weakness. At the same time, he also told the truth. It turned out that the reason why the world no longer had mutants was because he had added a substance to human food. This substance had the ability to destroy the mutants' X gene and thus prevent their birth. The doctor also proudly declared that he was the savior of humanity. However, he forgot that Wolverine still knew how to use a gun. When seeing Wolverine successfully defeat the doctor, the young mutants immediately launched an attack. They quickly destroyed destroyed all the remaining mercenaries, but the mercenary captain released X-24. Facing the young version of himself, Wolverine did not have enough strength to fight. In just one confrontation, he was seriously injured. When seeing Wolverine in danger, Laura did not hesitate to rush in to save him. She started a fierce battle with X-24, but her power was not yet complete, so she could not compare to X-24. In the critical situation, another young mutant controlled the Earth. He used an armored vehicle to press X-24 to the ground. Wolverine understood that this was only a temporary delaying measure, so he ordered the young mutants to run away first. He would stay behind to deal with the enemy. When Wolverine turned around, X-24 was freed from his control. He used his sharp claws to pierce Wolverine's shoulder and dragged him along the ground. Wolverine was finally nailed to a wooden stake. When Wolverine was near death, suddenly a gunshot rang out. X-24's head was blown off. It was Laura who used Wolverine's adamantium bullet. When Laura came to Wolverine's side, his life was almost over. He looked at Laura and told her in a fatherly tone. He told her to leave and not to become what the bad guys wanted her to be. At that moment, Wolverine heard the warmest words in his life. Laura opened her mouth and called Wolverine Dad. Wolverine smiled one last time and closed his eyes forever. His whole life had been filled with pain and anger. His immortality had made him always search for the meaning of life, but now his anger had ended with him, and he had also found the meaning of his life. These young mutants would continue his will and become the new hope of humanity. Then everyone buried Wolverine together. Before leaving, Laura placed a wooden X on his grave. This X symbolized the immortal memories of the X-Men generation. At the same time, it also signaled the birth of a new generation of X-Men. That was the entire content of the X-Men series. Thank you for your interest and follow-up. Goodbye, and see you again.